Can I just say something about Andrea?
So trial has started in the case of Adrian Gonzales. He is the school resource officer who is charged with 29 counts of child endangerment arising out of his response to the Uvalde, Texas school shooting that happened back in May of 2024. Now, this is a case I'm coming in on really cold. Really don't know much about the facts at all. And the only reason it really caught my attention at all is because, I saw it was happening yesterday, and sometimes I just have, flip through things, check in on stuff, kind of have it on in the background while I'm doing other things. And I happened to catch just a little bit of the defense opening, and it really caught my attention. I'm like, I'm gonna go back and pay a little bit more close attention to this. And the reason why is because it seemed particularly effective. Now, when I say I'm coming in cold on this case, what I should really say is that I come in without much sympathy for the defendant. And again, not because of any particular knowledge that I have about this case or this incident. I really know very little, other than just, the scope of it was so horrifying. But mainly just because of like residual bad feelings I still have about the Parkland case and what happened with the law enforcement officers that were involved there. There were several that were fired, and then I think got reinstated because of like appeal, administrative appeal, like union protection types of things. And I know there was one officer prosecuted that was acquitted. So basically, just a situation where, yeah, I mean, kind of from the outsider's view, looks like they just sort of left kids to die, and nobody suffered any kind of consequences about it. So that's, gonna kind of color my perspective. Just going into this case, seems like cops rarely face accountability. We already know that legally there's just a lot of precedent for the idea that cops don't have any duty at all to us, the civilians, no obligations to protect us and things like that. And quite frankly, that just seems kind of wrong, given the amount of trust that we place in them, and the reliance that we put on them to exercise their responsibility in a way that keeps us safe and gives us the incentive that we need to not just be out taking justice in our own hands if we don't expect the police to take care of it for us. So not a whole lot of sympathy for Mr. Gonzales coming in, but just this little bit of the defense opening I caught. I'm like, this might actually change my perspective. So I wanted to sit down and just go ahead and watch through the opening statements, the prosecutions and the defenses, and see what we think. See what I think about my initial impressions about the case, and where the evidence is going to take us, who's doing a good job, kind of classic trial breakdown kind of stuff. So with that, guys, let's go ahead and turn and take a look at the opening statements. I will warn you right off the bat, the sound is terrible. There's also like this weird chat bar, because this was the best best version I could find of it on YouTube. But that's their format, which is a little annoying. So I do apologize about that. But I've also got closed captions on to try to help if the sound does not improve.
It was awards day at Robb Elementary. The fourth graders lined up throughout the morning and gathered at the cafeteria with their parents. To receive certificates of achievement. It was a day of celebration. After the celebration, they returned to their homes and to their classes. They turned off the lights and they watched movies because it was a light day. Some of the kids got to go to recess. Just down the road was Hillcrest Funeral Home, and a man named Gilbert Lamons was working at the funeral home. It was about 11:30 when a truck crashed through a rail and into a ditch. So he did what any of us would do. He went to check on the driver to see if it was okay. He and Cody Brasino left the funeral home. He walked across the street, got close to the ditch, when they were met with a man who exited the truck and got out with a rifle, a high-powered rifle. So as you might expect, they turned and ran. Shots were fired. So they called the police. They called the police for help.
So far, I have kind of a mixed reaction to the storytelling. It's a little bit, disjointed, because we started with the story of the children and then we moved to the story of the truck and the funeral home. I've already kind of lost track of the names. This information is maybe a little bit more detailed than we need at this point. But I don't have any part of the story yet about the defendant. I mean, we all know there was a school shooting and there's going to be a story about the school shooting, but what really matters for purposes of this case is what's the defendant's role in that. And it just generally helps, I think, if you can sort of lay it out on the line right off the bat in an opening, and then go ahead and fill in the details, fill in the gaps, show me how you get there. But so far, this entire opening, we haven't heard anything at all yet about Adrian Gonzales. So I know that we'll get there. But just in terms of kind of keeping track of the story and following the story, the fact that there's already been a lot of the story that has nothing to do with Adrian Gonzales, I'm just not sure that's real helpful to the state here.
The gunman jumped over the fence, deliberate pace, across the schoolyard to the southwest corner building, and opened fire. Stephanie Hale was in the playground on the south end of the school. She heard the fire, and it didn't make her incapable of action. She protected the kids.
Okay, now I can already anticipate this is set up as a counterpoint to the defendant, but it's just kind of meaningless. Like, okay, what did she do? What did she do, and how does that relate to what I'm supposed to think about what Adrian Gonzales did or didn't do? I don't have any frame of reference to interpret this part of the story yet. So at this point, it's kind of just another detail that's out here that I'm already going to forget her name. I'm one of those people. The names, it's gone in like 2 seconds. If even that, you say your name to me and I'm literally shaking your hand saying nice to meet you and your name is already gone. Sorry, but I'm not alone in that. It may not be a great characteristic to have, but I'm not alone in that. And so there's, very decent chance you got other people on the jury. The names are already gone. And it's not helping at all to put into perspective, what are you saying Adrian Gonzales did and why is that a crime?
She got them to safety. They went into the classrooms. They did as they'd been trained. They hid in the dark and waited for help from the police. The teachers and the kids armed themselves with scissors to confront a gunman. To confront a gunman. Melody Forrest was also out there that day. She heard the shots fired. She had a concern for the kids. she was capable of action. She ran to where the gunfire was sounded. And there were kids at the south end that were about to go to recess that were told, get back in, get back in, get back in. And she doesn't leave her post until they get back in the west wing. But she stays there so long that when that happens and the last kid enters, she's face to face with the gunman. And he fires on her and she turns to run. And when she turns to run, she trips and she falls. And when she gets up, Adrian Gonzales, the police officer, is there.
Okay, so now Adrian Gonzales has finally made his appearance in the story. I can't picture any of this yet. I'm getting, you know, more names, more directions, south wing, west wing. It's just, you know, and she was there, you know, over there, kids were there. Like, none of this is helping me kind of form a visual of how all of this happened. But now we have Adrian Gonzales appearing in the story. The police officer is there. Okay, did he just arrive? Is there any kind of context to help me kind of understand his sudden materializing in the story? I know he's going to go on to tell me, okay, here's what Adrian Gonzales did and so forth. But if I don't have context to know when did he get there, what did he know, what did he see, I don't know how I'm in a really good position to kind of form a judgment about it. So we'll see where this goes, but so far I'm just not seeing how this fits in very well.
She says, he's over there. She urges him to go get him. Adrian Gonzales just says, where? Over there. He's wearing black. He's in the teacher's parking lot.
Okay. Over there is very unspecific. Teacher's parking lot is not. That's clear. But over there, asking where seems perfectly reasonable. In a situation like this, you're going to want to identify as much as you can about the nature of the threat, the location of the threat, and things like that. So far, this seems fine to me. Adrian Gonzales is there. She says he's over there. He says where, because we need to be more specific. And now she specifies he's wearing black. He's in the teacher's parking lot. Okay, what does Adrian Gonzales do next?
As shots are ringing out. This is not confusion. He gets on the radio and says, shots are fired. He's wearing black. He's in the parking lot. He knows where he is.
Okay, he gets on the radio. So he's communicating with other law enforcement officers. Where are they? Where are they? I mean, if they are in a superior position to respond and engage with the gunman, they need to be coordinating. You know, if they've like already set up and got a line of sight on the guy and he goes and like runs in the middle of it and now he's in their field of fire, that's not going to be a good place to be either. So we got to have some coordination, and shots are ringing out as he's communicating. He's like just learned from this woman. He's over there in the parking lot and he's in black and he's communicating that, and shots are ringing out while this is happening. So we're already, it seems like, at a point where it's he hasn't prevented anything. Like, it's already started. I'm not seeing where there's something he was supposed to do differently that would have stopped it. So it's got to come down to, like, would it have been less bad if he had acted differently? Because timing wise, there's nothing here that seems like I can really fault him for it at this point. So let's see if there's more.
But Adrian Gonzales remains at the south side of the school. The gunman makes his way up the west side of the west building where the fourth graders are. He fires shots into a classroom full of children at 102. Adrian Gonzales remains.
Okay, this definitely doesn't sound good. You know, he's making it sound like a school shooter is just kind of like systematically, without any kind of resistance, opposition, or whatever, just, you know, moving into the school. Sounds like it's taken a while. Like he must have had time to do something different, right? Or it wouldn't be a big deal. If this is all happening in like a second and a half, then him remaining there is not really like a fair characterization. It's just you don't have time to act yet. But if this is like a significant length of time that he's just waiting and not responding, all right, now I think we're going to need a little bit more context. I mean, once again, if he's like the only cop there at the scene, then that might be one thing. But if there's a bunch of them there, what's his rank in all this? Who's in charge of the scene? Who's coordinating the response? I'm gonna, I guess, still need to know a little bit more about why he's the one that I should be blaming with these criminal charges, as you know, specifically kind of uniquely responsible for what happened here. Now, I am aware, I think there's one other cop that got charged, and it might be one of the supervisors. Like I said, I came into this pretty cold, so I don't remember all the details. But they're not being tried together, right? So I've got to judge this guy on the merits of his own action or inaction. But I really need to understand how it fits into the picture of the total response to be able to do that. And I'm not feeling like the prosecutor is telling the story in a way that lets me understand that.
He moves down to classroom 104, fires shots into the classroom of 104. Adrian Gonzales remains. He moved halfway down the wing, fires more shots, this time not into the building because there's no defect in the building. It's not going into the windows, it's not going into the bricks. It's also at the same time when forces are coming, other police officers are starting to arrive.
Okay, now this got real sort of disjointed, I think. So we have him shooting into 102 and Adrian Gonzales remains. We have him shooting into 104 and Adrian Gonzales remains. Now I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that 102 and 104 are really close to each other. In fact, they're probably side by side, right? Because isn't that how room numbering conventions usually work? You'll have all the even numbers on one side, the odd numbers on the other side. So 102 would be next to 104. I don't have a time frame. I don't know how alarmed I should be about Adrian Gonzales being outside. And then we kind of segued into this more shots, but I'm not even sure what to make of them because we've introduced a defect and there's no defect. So I guess he didn't shoot in the room, but he shot. But where did he shot? We haven't been told. I'm confused. Confused about what happened here. And now the police are starting to come in. And so I need context. Did these police just get there? You know, was Adrian Gonzales here this whole time and then the police showed up and came in and like like got there after him and went in and dealt with it, that's going to be one story, one set of facts, and that's going to make him look real bad. But where did these officers come from? Who are these officers? How did they know to come in? Was there communication between them and Adrian Gonzales? I don't know any of this. So I'm just left with like, okay, well, it sounds like it could be really bad, but it also like could not be. Like I'm not sure yet. There's just not enough information coming.
He then hurries to the west door and enters. It's been a minute.
A minute. Okay, it's been a minute. So we have a time frame now. If that's being specific, it's been 1 minute. On the one hand, a minute is not very long. On the other hand, a minute can be a lifetime. So I think, you know, this one could maybe go either way. But I got to kind of know more. I got to know more about the context of the response as a whole to understand the significance of that minute. So he did go in, but he waited a minute. He had been with this other person whose name I already spaced, Melody. Yay me. I think it was Melody. And Melody had provided him information and he was getting clarity and he had gotten on the radio. So where's Melody now? Is he taking care of Melody? Is he getting more information from her? Is he just, you know, hunkering down, cowering, not wanting to respond? I don't know. But again, it does seem to kind of make a difference in terms of whether what he was doing in this situation was reasonable, was expected. A minute.
And there's a break in the shooting, and Adrian Gonzales remains.
Wait, I thought you said he went to the door. I thought you said he went in, but now you're saying he remains? He remains where? I'm lost. Did the shooter go to the door and not know? I thought he said he went from one side of the building to the west door. Isn't that what he said? But now he remains. Where does he remain? This is the kind of opening that he has set it up to be dramatic and to have this theme. His theme is Adrian Gonzales remains, but the problem is that it's kind of incoherent in light of his facts. I don't know what Adrian Gonzales remains in this context is even supposed to mean if you just told me he went in the door after a minute.
That gunman then walks down the hallway, gets to room 111 and 112, the entryway, and fires in the neighborhood of 20 shots in the hallway. And Adrian Gonzales remains.
So Adrian Gonzales remains, not sure where still. He goes to another room, sounds like down the hallway and across the hall, and he shoots a lot of shots. So they definitely will have heard that. We already know other police officers has already responded. Where are they? What are they doing? How does Adrian Gonzales's position relate to theirs? What if he's supposed to be providing cover for other police officers? Then he's supposed to be where he is.
The children in 111 and 112 are done as they're trained. In the dark, lights off, be quiet, hide, and wait for Adrian Gonzales. And the gunshots get near, and the slaughter begins. One of the shots penetrates the window going out of room 111. Melanie Flores is still urging Adrian Gonzales to go in. She sees.
Okay, so now Melody or Melanie, I thought he said Melody before, is urging him to go in. So now we have Adrian Gonzales is still outside with her. And I'm lost on it's been a minute and he went to the door. He must have been talking about the gunman, but that was not clear at all. Because I guess now we got Adrian Gonzales back outside, not even in the school. This is just the problem sometimes with trying to throw this many details and this many characters and stuff like that into your story, because you start throwing pronouns around, he, the him, and the whatever, and not being specific, and it's really hard to keep track of what happened. What are you telling me that happened here?
Sees the shot come through the window. Adrian Gonzales tells the police he sees the shot go through the window. Adrian Gonzales gets on the radio and says, "Guys, I think he's made it in the building."
So he's still on the radio communicating information. He hasn't gone inside and engaged. Definitely not ideal. If there's been all these shots in these other classrooms before he even got to this classroom, and it's been a minute, yeah, you would definitely want somebody to have engaged at that point. I'm not quite sure yet that, Adrian Gonzales was supposed to be that person. I've gotten confused by who's there and what they're doing. The fact that there's other cops that responded, the fact that he seems to have this role of communicating on the radio. Did anybody tell him on the radio, you need to go in and engage? I don't know. He seems to be in the position of he's providing information to other police officers. And it tends to suggest to me he's not the initial response guy. Maybe it shouldn't matter in a situation like this, but you can't have a chaotic kind of free-for-all without coordination. It's going to be ineffective. It's going to be messy. It's going to put people at risk. And so there's some kind of system at work here with the police response that I don't know anything about what that is from this prosecutor. He's kind of avoiding telling that part of the story. And that makes me a little bit suspicious because I just have the hints that it's there. And so why are you not telling me? If he's getting on the radio and talking to the cops and none of the cops are responding, dude, what are you still doing out there? Get the hell in there and intercept the guy and stop him. Then I'm going to be, alarmed, deeply alarmed at this guy's behavior. But in and of itself, just what we've heard, not sure that he's not playing the role he's supposed to be playing in a response like this.
This isn't confusion. Adrian Gonzales remains. For the next minute and a half, about 60 shots go into children. And Adrian Gonzales remains. 3.5 minutes into this ordeal, while Adrian Gonzales is still standing out there, his boss shows up. Peter Arredondo, along with Sergeant Coronado. They're running up adjacent to another building, get about the same distance Adrian Gonzales is from the gunshots, and they hear the shots going off. And Coronado yells, what you would expect a police officer to yell. Shots fired, get in the building. 3.5 minutes later.
Okay, so these other officers, whose names I've already forgotten, but I know one is his boss, arrive late on the scene, 3.5 minutes later. Kind of typical for, the supervisory cops, because they're not, out on patrol or responding to calls and stuff. They have to get there from the police station. So they get there about 3.5 minutes in and hear the shots and yell, shots fired, get in the building. Now, this is the boss. I got to assume this is like the commanding officer, the senior guy on the scene, the one who is going to be making calls about who's doing what when and stuff like that. So seems appropriate for him to do that. I'm supposed to take from this, I can tell that should have been Adrian Gonzales's response as well. Should have, well before this, when he was aware that there were gunshots, he should have immediately gone for the shooter. And that might be the case. But this guy is a school resource officer. He's not the boss. And I don't know what his role is. They're not giving me that. This story is relying a lot on the emotionalism of what happened to those kids and wanting me to transfer that to the police officer. And it's tempting. It is real tempting because, it's kind of hard to imagine that for 3.5 minutes, somebody could sit and listen to shot after shot after shot. I mean, so far, it sounds like he's described 100 shots. If there's 60 in room 111, and there was 20 in each of rooms 102 and 104, or maybe there's 60 total. Again, it's just the story is not really that clear, but it's a lot of shots. It's a lot of shots. And it's very tempting to think, you know what? Forget about chain of command, forget about training, forget about, the operation. These are kids at risk. You need to get in there and you need to take care of it, whatever it takes. It's very tempting. But the problem is that you can't let your emotions get the best of you in a situation like that. In a high adrenaline, high risk type of situation, that's the kind of thing, being reactive instead of being thoughtful, instead of being strategic. That's the kind of thing that can blow it up into a much worse tragedy. Because if you do something stupid and you get yourself shot, now how much longer is it going to take before someone else can get in and neutralize this guy? And how many kids are going to die in the meantime? And so it's always so easy to kind of imagine this counterfactual. You can always imagine a scenario where it goes exactly the way, you want it to. But reality doesn't have to go along with your daydream. And in fact, unfortunately, rarely does. And so that's why they have tactics and plans and, specific responses, the way that law enforcement respond to events like this, very similar to how the military is going to respond to a threat. You're going to have tasks that are assigned to different members of the team. It's of critical importance that they perform their task and not get overcome by emotion, and just throw away your medic kit and charge the machine gun nest. Like, no, don't do that, because you put your entire team in jeopardy when that happens. So I'm supposed to rely on, the emotion of what happened. I'm supposed to kind of imagine what it might look like in a different scenario and just assume, that everything would have gone well in that scenario. And I just don't have enough information, enough context to be able to evaluate how close is reality to that scenario at all. If his goal in this response, his job assigned to him, was to sit out there and convey information to the other members of the team, then that's what he needs to do for everybody's safety and well-being. So I don't know. The fact that the boss showed up 3.5 minutes later and said, "Get in the building." He's a commanding guy. He's the boss.
So Adrian Gonzales joins the other two officers and Donald Page, who's just arrived, and they go into the building. He enters the building 3 minutes and 45 seconds after he got there, and after the damage is done. So we ask ourselves, was this his first day on the job? Was he a rookie?
These are kind of strawmen. I mean, that's not what I've been asking this whole time. In fact, almost the opposite. He could be extremely highly trained to a specific role in a response like this and have performed it impeccably. I don't know. I don't have any reason to think you'd only behave like this if you were a rookie. I feel like this is really straw manning. Questions about the case. Like this is not the only reason that you might, have questions about, is there a problem with what he did and with what he didn't do? It's always like, it's like unfair, to characterize, you just like dismiss, like that's the only reason he's a rookie. Well, no. You should steel man the opposing argument and then tell me why that doesn't apply. Explain to me the training, explain to me the roles, explain to me who all was there, explain to me what the coordination was. Or if there wasn't any of those things, tell me that, because that's a real different story. If Adrian Gonzales is there at the scene by himself the whole time, just waiting, that's going to maybe be a little bit of a different situation, isn't it? But I also want to know, what are these guys trained to do? What are they told to do in a situation like this?
Adrian Gonzales was a veteran of 10 years. He'd been at the UVALDE Police Department for 10 years. He'd been to the school district for a year. He had thousands of hours of training. He went to compel training, which was active shooter training, which is pretty straightforward. When you hear gunshots, you go to the gunfire.
Okay, if that's the training and that's it, then he's got a big problem. Because it seems pretty clear he didn't do that. He did hear gunshots. He announced it over the radio. And he waited, what? Kind of lost track of the time frame here. 2.5 minutes or 3.5 minutes. Because at some point there was like a minute in, but it got very confusing what exactly the story is here. But it doesn't matter. If this is the bottom line of the training, always go to the gunshot, period, full stop, end of story, then, yeah, he's got a problem. I'm just a little skeptical that that's the full extent of the training. Because if you're running towards the gunshot and somebody else is running towards the gunshot and other people are coming from another angle running towards the gunshot and it's chaos and nobody knows who else is there and what they're doing, and then you shoot at the guy and then the guy that's coming from the other direction hears your gunshot and thinks you're the shooter and takes you out, yet no, that's why that's not how it works. So I'm kind of skeptical that the training is really this straightforward. Guess we'll find out.
But it wasn't just active shooter training. They didn't just sit in a classroom, they practiced. They practiced, what do you do if it's in an open area? Like this open area. And
this open area inside of a school is an open area? I just assume that means more like if it's out on the playground or if it's in the parking lot or something like that. Now, it sounds like the guy was like initially in the parking lot and he shot at Melody. Is that what he said? But it's not clear to me because she ran and hid and then Adrian Gonzales was there, right? He just materialized. And so we don't know where he had been, how he got there, what he knew, whether he'd heard the gunshot. And then doesn't the guy, he said he went in the school? I lost track of the story, but I don't think this is an open area inside a school. Unless he's talking about the initial thing outside in the parking lot, but you didn't tell me a story that lets me understand how or why Adrian Gonzales was even present for what happened in the parking lot, let alone, what he knew or how he should have responded.
they trained Adrian Gonzales how to do his job safely. And that is, you look for concealment and cover. Concealment means the gunman can't see you. It may not protect you if he shoots, but he can't see you. Cover means you're protected. The corner of a building means you're protected.
Concealment and cover is definitely not consistent with run towards the gunshot. So already getting a sense that, yeah, the training is going to be a little bit more complex than what you kind of told me the bottom line was. Concealment and cover, kind of sounds like he had that, maybe? He's outside the building? Does he mean he's supposed to go inside and look for concealment and cover? I mean, I would assume, you're clearing a building. That's kind of what you do. Use the walls, because a hallway does not offer much in the way of concealment and cover. So it's kind of dangerous to do that.
We're not asking Adrian Gonzales to commit suicide. He has been trained to go to the corner of a building and distract, delay, and impede the gunman while help is arriving.
Okay, distract, delay, and impede the gunman while help is arriving from a position of being concealed and covered. That definitely sounds ideal. You know, no question about it. That's what you would want to do. Doesn't sound like he did that, but it's not real clear. It would be really nice if this prosecutor had taken these concepts. Like, here's a way you might frame an opening that would make this really clear, is you would tell the story of what Adrian Gonzales should have done. Here's what the training shows. Like, you can do this in a way that isn't going to get objected to as you're being argumentative or whatever. You're still arguing the facts that are going to come in at evidence. And it's based on the training. This is what you should have done. And so the evidence is going to show he was trained to do this. He could have gone to this position. He could have taken these actions. But he didn't do that. And so instead, the evidence is going to show you here's what actually did happen. That would make it real clear, I think, that there's a big disconnect here between what the training says he's supposed to do and what he actually did. But all I've gotten is this kind of conceptual framework that's pasted on top of a just partial, story. It's giving me detail where I don't need it. I don't care what people's names are at this point. And it's not giving me the detail I do need, which is basically like, okay, what's the total context? Like I've been saying, who else is there? What positions are they in? What are their roles, etc. And what were the alternatives available to him? What was he supposed to do? Just tell me outright. What was he supposed to do? Surely you're going to have some evidence that shows me what he was supposed to do. So just tell me that in your opening, and it's a lot easier for me to understand.
But Adrian Gonzales does nothing more than mic his microphone and tell other officers what's going on. So why are we here? When a child is in danger and calls 911, we have the right to expect a response.
That's it. That's it. That's it. We have the right to expect a response. They got a response. It's just not the response that we would have liked. It's not the ideal response. It's not the perfect response. It's not a response that was able to stop this from happening. I don't know yet if that's right or wrong, but they did get a response. Not impressed. Not impressed with this opening from the state so far.
May I proceed, Judge? Please. If I may have a moment to rewrite the law, I got a piece on the map here.
All right.
A map. Bless you, defense lawyer. A map will be extremely helpful.
May I please support? Those of counsel. Members of the jury.
Okay, good map.
The monster who hurt those children is dead. And I mean, it's emotional. I could understand why Bill, when he talked to you, I could understand why he had emotion. I can't talk to you without it either. I think you heard me say it yesterday. This is one of the worst things ever happened in our country. There's only been a few like this. This many, this young, innocent. It's awful. But Adrian Gonzales did the best he could with what he knew at the time. Adrian Gonzales The prosecution got up here in the opening statement, and you're going to see, and Nico, my partner, is going to come up here and he's going to go through the times after I talk to you. But you're going to see that the prosecutor has tried to condense time at some points and then tried to stretch it out. But one of the things that you didn't hear in his opening was any preciseness of the times. We heard about a minute. That's not what we're going to do in this trial. We're going to talk about what Adrian knew, what was happening second by second, so that you can understand that we're right. We know that Adrian never was able to confront the gunman. But the prosecution's going to agree, and the evidence is going to prove throughout the trial, Adrian never saw him. The prosecution says knowing the general location.
Adrian never saw, I assume he means the gunman. Adrian never saw the gunman. That's not really going to be helpful if Adrian didn't see the gunman because Adrian was like cowered behind a concrete barrier the whole time, outside while kids are getting shot inside, if he was supposed to be inside. So, I mean, the second by second is definitely, I think, going to be helpful. It's going to be more detailed and an improvement on the kind of general story that I got from the prosecutor. I'm not sure it's going to overcome the challenge of, if this was 3.5 minutes that he's listening to gunshots go off and he didn't do anything, if he was supposed to do something in this situation, seconds aren't, I don't think are going to matter. I'm going to have a challenge with that. They're not conceding the emotionalism ground to the state, which I think is appropriate because, yeah, they're right. The monster in all of this is the person that pulled the trigger. And I think that the risk you always have to be cognizant of, and I'm aware of it, like with my own thoughts about, Parkland and stuff like that, is the risk that, you don't get to like satisfy your emotion about that situation. And so you just transfer it to somebody else. You scapegoat. Scapegoat is blameless, but you find somebody else that you can blame for something that they're just, it may or may not be fair to blame them about. I don't know. So I do think it's good to kind of even the playing field from that sort of moral standpoint. The monster who killed the children is dead. It's good. It does, it does bring us back to, the sort of bottom line about why all this happened anyway. And nothing's going to undo that. Nothing that they do here today is going to undo it. It would have been nice to follow that up with a real, clear, concise explanation about why Adrian Gonzales couldn't have stopped it. We got that he did the best he could with what he knew. And so I'm kind of trusting that now they're going to spell this out for me. What does that mean? He did the best he could with what he knew at the time, and we're going to go second by second. The prosecution has been sort of playing games, which is, this is getting argumentative. Like they could theoretically object to this, and I don't think it would be a real problem. Arguing about the prosecutor's opening is really not valid opening, but be that as it may, a little bit of criticism for both sides so far in terms of their storytelling, because the states really minimized the overall context and the information I need to put Adrian Gonzales's actions to situate them in terms of the response and what was he supposed to be doing? What were other people doing? What should he have done differently? And now kind of likewise for the defense, okay, he did the best he could with what he knew at the time. I'm willing to hear that out, but just it doesn't grip me. Doesn't grip me as a theory. Did the best he could. It kind of almost sounds a little excusey, you know. Maybe once I hear what he has to say about how Adrian Gonzales did the best he could, maybe we'll have a way to kind of frame that a little bit more powerfully. But gonna need this, I think, fleshed out a little bit more than that.
Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And one of the things that you heard the prosecution say, you heard him say that Adrian said he's over there in the parking lot. He's over there in the teacher's parking lot on the west side of the building. What he didn't tell you is that when Adrian said that, and Nick was going to talk about it, but he said that. This is the parking lot on the west side of the building. When Adrian calls that out, he's over here, all the way on the other side of this building. And as far as being here, calling it out, the shooter had already entered the building at the time that Adrian says.
Now this map has already started to confuse me because I can't tell what he's really pointing to, where, and so I know Adrian Gonzales was way over here. The shooter was, I guess, like over here, but then he was in the building. Kind of helps if you're going to use a map, introduce it. If there's going to be points, locations on this map that matter, show me what they are before you go telling me the story. Introduce me to the setting. This is the school. This is the building where the shooting took place. This is, this is the parking lot, like the scenes that are going to play an important point in the story that you're about to tell me about who went where when. So promising here in terms of having the visual, but the actual execution of that leaves a bit to be desired.
He's on the west side of the building in the teacher's parking lot. He does not know. Adrian does not know where he is. But I want to talk about it using this map so that you can get an idea of what happened. First, the issue was that, The issue was that,
I'm sorry, my assistant's trying to get in touch with me.
yeah, it's no, it's fine.
Awkward.
Where we start, and just so that everybody can understand. And oftentimes in these kind of cases, we don't.
He's jumping all over the place. Where are we going? We were just talking at the map. Now I understand we got distracted. The judge's phone rang. But where the hell are we going now to talking about often in these kinds of cases? This took some kind of weird side turn. I don't know why we're segueing. It seems a little kind of too impromptu. I don't know. Tell us, what don't we whatever in these kinds of cases?
We don't use the names of these monsters because that's a lot of times why they do this, right?
Okay.
He's a monster. What he did to these children, what you're going to see that he did to these children is horrifying. It's disgusting. It's terrible. But he didn't start with the kids. The first thing he did before he got to Robb Elementary was he shot his grandmother in the face at his.
Okay. That's not on the map. That's a big segue from the map for sure. We were going to start showing something on the map, and now we've segued to he shot his grandmother in the face. You don't have to sell that this guy is a monster to me. Okay, I get it. I don't know what shooting his grandmother in the face has to do with what Adrian Gonzales was supposed to do at the scene. I kind of suspect it doesn't have anything to do with it, but it's just another sort of emotional thing to throw into the mix. So that maybe, I don't know, maybe we redirect, make sure we're focusing our anger on the shooter instead of on Mr. Gonzales. I don't know, but that's quite a segue.
So she gets shot in the face. He gets in a vehicle. Her house is probably a couple of blocks. So if you can imagine the map extending out here, he gets in a car. He doesn't know how to drive. He gets in a car with that firearm. He comes up Grove Street here, and you're going to see that this right here is like a concrete culvert. It's got a railing here, and obviously somebody normally would make that turn. This dead ends into this culvert. After shooting his grandmother in the face, he comes down here, blows through this railing, and his car ends up in the concrete culvert.
So by a concrete culvert, I assume he's talking about some kind of like channel, some kind of drainage ditch or something like that that's lined with concrete. It's unclear to me from this description whether that was on purpose or not. Is this all? I mean, if it's he doesn't know how to drive and so he just kind of inadvertently didn't make the turn and he went through the fence and ended up in the culvert, and now it looks like he's over there on the school grounds. Is this all just kind of bad luck? That he happened to go that direction and end up going through that fence? Was this not planned? I don't know. I don't know if it matters. It's just kind of a detail. I'm not quite sure how to make sense out of it. Not really sure why I'm hearing it, I guess.
Now, this is going to be important because if you listen to the prosecution, what the prosecution is wanting, I suppose, and expecting and trying to show you or argue in this trial is that everybody has to have perfect understanding of what's happening. But you're going to see that this is the first thing that contributes to confusion. You're going to hear that there has never been a school shooting in the United States of America that begins with somebody wrecking into a culvert like that. Now,
okay, I got to pause here. So, couple things. They are introducing confusion now, which does make sense, right? Yes. Gunshots echo concrete buildings, stuff like that. It's a stressful situation. People don't always interpret things all that well in the fog of war, as they say. So it makes sense that this would be a confusing situation to have to respond to. And the prosecutor had spent some time kind of trying to pre-butt that. This wasn't confusion. Of course, now I don't remember specifically what he said wasn't confusion. The time, the 3.5 minutes, the 60 shots. I don't even remember now. So it wasn't a very good story. But this whole no school shooting has ever started with someone wrecking into a culvert. Dude, come on. This is a very specific detail that, of course, it's like, of course, how many places even have culverts like this? Okay, so probably first off, you're already limited to the Western United States because we're the ones that have the issues with, erosion and stuff like that, because our water system works a little bit different than it does over in the East, where like the groundwater is up at ground level. I mean, has somebody crashed a car and then gone on a school shooting? Has somebody wrecked through a fence and done a school shooting? Somebody broken onto the property? Like, those seem to be a little bit more fair comparisons because they seem like they would just be more likely to happen. Like, of course, nobody's wrecked into how many times do people wreck into a culvert and then commit any crime? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client could not have beaten his wife because this is the first time in the country that somebody has wrecked their car and fallen into a concrete culvert and then beaten their wife. Like, no, No, dude, like the fact that it's idiosyncratic doesn't make it weird. I find it hard to believe that you wouldn't anticipate that someone might break onto the property, and that would color your response to it. I don't know. This was not a good not a good explanation for why it wouldn't be confusing, or why it was confusing. I mean, I expect it to be confusing just by the circumstances, but the fact that no other school shooting had a car go into a culvert, of course not.
What does this tell a police officer? And you'll hear what the evidence is going to show. This tells a police officer somebody has maybe shot an adult, right? Maybe committed some other crime, maybe committed a robbery, maybe trying to get away, or maybe is drunk, right? And doesn't navigate the turn, or maybe was texting. Some other thing is happening. This is not how a school shooting starts.
Okay, no, I buy that. I do buy this. That yeah, you wouldn't automatically jump to the assumption that just because this car crashed through the fence and ended up in the culvert that necessarily a school shooting is about to happen. That's logical. You probably, yes, would first think this guy's drunk, this guy's on drugs, you know, this guy is fighting with his wife in the car, you know, something like that. So I can see that being an issue for trying to sort out what's happening before it gets to the point of the guy is firing the gun at people. And that's where I think the prosecution, you know, made the best argument, is that, you know, between the first time, if I understood his timeline right, between the first time the gunman shot at Melody, whatever her name was, in the parking lot, and before Adrian Gonzales and his boss and the other guy showed up and went into the school, it had been 3.5 minutes and more than 60 shots fired. That part is what you would need to know to understand, oh, this isn't a drunk driver, this is a school shooting. And it wouldn't have taken that whole time. You know, you're not sitting there on like shot 35, like, oh, but are we sure it's not a drunk driver? Like, no, of course not. You know, by now it's more serious than that. And you knew from the first time the first shot was fired. So, yeah, the crash happening isn't going to alert you that a school shooting is happening. But the first time somebody fires a gun, now you're on alert. Now you know the situation is something different. So, okay, I mean, yes, I know we need to tell the story, but if we're also going to focus on what he knew and when he knew it, this part isn't that important because it's not a school shooting yet. And I don't think anybody's saying he should be responsible for not knowing it was a school shooting at this point in time.
It just happens to be next to a school, and this is important. So the shooter wrecks, and as the prosecution says, there's a fence right here. He climbs the fence. This is the funeral home he was talking about. People come out of this funeral home because they see this wreck, and he fires shots. Now, where's Adrian at this time? And just so you understand, this is Robb Elementary. These are all the buildings in Robb Elementary. Robb Elementary does not have an officer that's there all the time. So he is not the officer for Robb Elementary. He's not the police officer that's there.
Okay, I do think that's important because yeah, if he's like there, he's stationed at the school all the time and he's aware of this stuff going on, it puts a little bit of a different spin on both like what he would know, how he would know it, and also just the time frames in which we'd expect him to be acting, to be getting involved and stuff like that, getting on the radio and all of those types of details. So if the school is over here in these buildings and the shot is fired over across what looks like a big track there, it does not look like a big track. I don't know if that's an actual track or not, or if that's just kind of how how the old Texas landscaping is looking. But it's over, seems like a fair distance from the building. It's shooting back towards, the other side of the street. I can see where it's not necessarily clear that if you're inside the building, you would even know that this is on the property. You wouldn't necessarily know that this involves you at all. Now, I don't think that matters in terms of, does the school perceive a risk? Do you, go through your drill, your active response drill, to, do your best to keep the children safe? Just because of the proximity of something like that seems to make sense. But in terms of the officer having a duty and what he's supposed to do and stuff, I can see how, even if he had been stationed out there at the school, this might alert you to a situation, but doesn't still necessarily put you on notice that like the threat is on our doorstep.
He is not at that school. He is actually at a park because he typically works at the high school in Uvalde, and he's at the park with a bunch of the students who they're having there's a different kind of celebration. As the prosecutor said, this is towards the end of the year, so students are it's not, as we all remember in elementary and even high school. Once you get to the end of May, you're not doing a whole lot.
This is rambling.
Award ceremonies, talking to parents, all the.
Stop rambling. Stop rambling. Get back to the story. We get it. He was at a park. Where's the park? Park's not on the map, right? You showed us before. If I stood over here, this is where grandma's house is. Could you show us where the park is? We don't need to go back to elementary school and all of the things that happened towards the end of the year. It's fine. Unless it matters, in which case you should just tell me what matters and not, remind me that school is different towards the end of the year. This is very rambly.
All those other things, watching movies in the classroom, things like that. Adrian is away from here at this park, but he hears the call. He's not the officer actually assigned to even take this call. The call comes out as an accident. A car has crashed into this culvert. He's not the officer assigned. There's a different officer, you'll see, that actually comes up here later on, and the person assigned to the call doesn't ever do any of the things that you're going to see that Adrian did. But he gets a call to crash, and he says, okay, I'll go out and see what's up, see what's going on.
Wait, so Adrian does, where we've kind of lost our specificity on our characters here because of the different characters and the using pronouns and stuff like that. Is this Adrian saying, I'm going to go? I assume it is. I'm going to go check out, even though it's not his call. He's gonna follow up on it anyway. I think that's what he's saying, but it's not completely clear.
You'll hear a particular thing about Uvalde. Uvalde has a population of people who are undocumented. You will hear that 50 times in a 2-month period is typical for there to be some sort of accident or bailout involving people who are undocumented. It's one of those things that's particular to Uvalde, and particular to the region. It's one of those things that officers deal with all the time, and it's one of the things schools deal with all the time.
I don't know why this relates specifically to undocumented people. I don't know why we needed to bring that in, because I'm here to tell you meth heads do that too. I mean, pretty much anybody that gets in an accident, drunk people bail quite frequently. People that hit their wives and caused a crash and then run away. Yeah, it happens a lot. Like, I don't know what the point was of bringing up Uvalde's got a lot of undocumented people who bail out of their cars all the time. I'm not sure. Now, of course, I have to notice the defendant sitting there in the defense table with his very Latino name, Adrian Gonzales, and his very Latino visage Is that part of what the defense is concerned about here? You know, found the brown guy to blame. I don't know. I'm not from Uvalde. I don't know the culture. I don't know the context. I see that all the people in my screen right now associated with the court process are gringos. So, you know, is that part of the concern? I don't know, but it was just a unnecessary fact, I think, to bring in. Undocumented people bail out of the car all the time. Lots of people bail out of the car all the time. I guarantee you, even in Uvalde, it's not just people without papers.
And this is important because when that crash happens, the school does not go into lockdown. Why doesn't the school go into lockdown? Because nobody is expecting that this is a school shooting. They're expecting that this is a drunk. This is somebody getting away from something else. Now, why is that important? Even when he's advancing or leaving his car, what they can see and what they can tell at the time is not telling anybody that he is trying to get into this school to hurt any children in this school. He is trying to get away from the scene of this crash.
Okay, so we got that, but you've also already told us he shot back at the funeral home. And so at some point, somebody was alerted to the fact that a gun was shot, because otherwise we wouldn't know that. So how did we come into this information? When and how did that get presented to police? When and how did that get presented to the school? Is that what triggered the school to go into lockdown? I understand the crash wouldn't. That doesn't seem unreasonable probably to anybody. But a shot taking place like right there in the area, even if it's not directed at you, being that close, seems like that would be a good reason to go into lockdown.
And that's one of the themes that throughout is that what's happening with this particular situation is confusing the police about what actually the intentions are of this person. They start setting up perimeters that you'll see later because they're thinking he's trying to just get away from them. Nobody's thinking, we know now, they know now, everybody knows now that he was messaging people that he's about to go shoot up a school. Everybody knows now that he was disturbed, that he was a monster, that he was trying to do this.
Okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know he was messaging people. It's the first time I'm hearing about it. So now I'm hearing it was premeditated. This was planned. I don't know if his method here was planned, but you know, the outcome was again, like, yeah, nobody I think would expect police officers to know that ahead of time. And so now we know, but we didn't at the time. And I get that. And okay, the police are setting up the perimeter, but how does that relate to the gunshot back towards the funeral home? Did they not know about that? Because surely you would be taking a different approach with the school right there. If you knew that there's like a random person with a gun that's loose, that's already fired at some people, wouldn't it be kind of a priority to go secure the school? So I'd like to know more about this, because you know the defense lawyer just kind of dropped it in there. And we knew that from the prosecutor's opening too. He shot back towards the funeral home. How does that factor into what everyone knew when they knew it and how they reacted?
He was speeding towards the school to do it and just happened to have not negotiated the turn and went into this culvert. But at the moment, that's not what it looks like. That's not what it looks like to him. It's not what it looks like to anybody. It's not what it looks like to anybody, any of the officers that come up. But then there is gunfire. And that's important. So he shoots here towards the funeral home.
Yes, that is important.
At the same time and around, Adrian is starting his response. And Adrian also comes up Grove Street. And this is important. He'll talk to you about the fact that.
Stop telling me that this is important. Okay, show me why it's important. Stop saying this is important. You just told me that the shooting back towards the funeral home is important, and I agree it's important, but I don't understand how this fits in with the police response and with what they knew and when they knew it, which you've also told me is important. Show me. Don't just rely on telling me it's important. I need to understand how it's important. It is important. And you're leaving me hanging here, dude. If they're setting up the perimeter, did they know there was a gunman at the time when that's how they're responding? Or did they not? And why not? How did that information move around? That's important.
There was Melody Flores. As Ramos is walking this way, and he does walk. He starts walk, shoots.
I'm assuming he just used the name of the shooter that he told us he wasn't going to use because, you don't repeat the name. And so I think that's a slip because it's the first time we've heard the name. Or is this a witness? I mean, I think he's talking about the shooter now because he's saying he shoots, but you're not being consistent with how you identify people here, and that's going to make it confusing. If you're going to commit to, we're not going to use his name, we're just going to call him the monster, then you really got to stick with that.
Here, starts walking this way. You'll hear that people from the funeral home, the homes up here, can see that he hide behind cars, and they call that in. But that's not something communicated over the radio to the police. But they do call it in that he is here in the parking lot. By the time Adrian is getting here to the property, he understands. He starts to understand because now the people are calling 911. They'll talk about, and now they're saying that shots are fired. So Adrian here, as he's coming down here.
So as Adrian is arriving to the property, he knows, like, this whole issue with confusion over the car in the culvert, it seems like doesn't really matter. If the idea was you don't necessarily assume that means there's an active shooter, I get it, but now people are saying there's a shooter. And so there's a shooter. I don't know about the confusion. Where is he on the scene? Is he the first one to respond? You said there was another officer that was assigned to the call. So he wasn't the one assigned to the call. Where's that other officer? How does he fit into this? People are calling 911 to say there's a shooter. Is that information going through dispatch on the radio to the people in the field?
He starts to hear shots are fired. This is a gate that gets onto that school property. It should be closed. It wasn't.
So he starts to hear shots are fired. Does that mean he hears pow pow gunshots, or he hears people saying shots are fired? Does he hear it on the radio? Does he hear it on the scene? Or is he hearing pow pows? It's a terrible use of language, because that also kind of seems to matter. That kind of seems to matter. If you hear pow pows, that's firsthand knowledge. If you hear just people saying there was a shooter, then you still have questions. Where, at who, when, how long ago? There's still going to be some details you got to flesh out. So it kind of matters. He heard that shots are fired. What does that even mean?
And Adrian drives right through here. So he is responding, and you're seeing shots fired, hearing shots fired, understanding, okay, this is not just an accident anymore. And then you'll hear that Melody Flores, the teacher that the prosecution talked to you about, the teacher that the prosecutor said, well, she acted, right? And we agreed. She did see kids, and she told them, when we talk about the west part of the building, south part of the building, west part of the building, south part of the building. She told them, get back inside, get back inside. As she's over here telling them this, and he's here firing rounds, and you're going to know that that's where he's around this area firing rounds. Adrian is coming here. Once Ramos is behind these cars in the parking lot, Adrian doesn't see him at all. Never does. The prosecutor never ever saw, not in his life, ever saw this gunman. Gunman's here. Flores is here. Adrian sees Flores from that distance and thinks that she may be the gunman, or that she may have, or somebody. He doesn't know if it's a man or a woman. You'll see the distances. It's too far to tell. But he thinks that he's hearing that there's a person. Hearing that he knows there's shots fired. He believes that this person is either grappling with a gunman or is the gunman themselves. The reason he thinks that they might have grappled is because, as Bill said, she trips and she falls in, and this is all dirt. So there's like this cloud of dust, and it looks like from that distance. What does Adrian do? He acts. You will watch him, and there's a camera from this funeral home that will show this. He comes in, and he spots her. He zeroes in on her, doesn't know it's a her, doesn't know it's a coach, doesn't know it's a teacher, thinks that that's what he's there to respond to, thinks that that's potentially the danger that he's there for. And he drives straight to her. He goes straight at her until he gets here. And this is where Adrian ends up parking his car, and you'll see that. Adrian parks here. She falls down here in the dirt. Remember, this is the south side of the building. 5 seconds after he gets out of the car and realizes this isn't a gunman and there's nobody else here but her, and he's trying to ask what's happening. 5 seconds after that, the shooter starts shooting into the side of this school.
Okay. So we're getting a little more clarity here, a little bit more specificity. The map does help, although it's, it's a little small and the heres are, it won't matter for the appeal purposes because opening statements don't matter for the appeal really, almost never. But I hope they do better than this at trial, because here, what that's going to read like in a transcript is it's just going to say here, and there's going to be a parenthetical indicating, and you're going to have no idea what he was pointing at on the map when he was saying here. So, not ideal in terms of being able to kind of go back and recreate what exactly he's talking about. But we get the idea. He hears the shots. So he hears shots themselves. Not clear if it's one or two, or more. Not sure, but he hears shots fired. He sees this cloud of dust, thinks that might be the shooter or somebody grappling with the shooter. So he drives over to that direction, parks, gets out, sees it's Melody Flores, and 5 seconds, I guess he's talking to her at the time. Don't have it real filled in, but 5 seconds after he gets out of the car, the shooter starts shooting into the side of the school. So now what Adrian Gonzales knows is that Melody Flores is not the shooter, and the shooter is still shooting. And I don't know if he knows, if he's got an issue with being able to hear the direction out here or anything like that. I don't know. We'll have to see. But, absent some kind of evidence to that, I would assume he has a general idea, at least, of the direction that the shooter is in. So I don't know that this is real helpful for the defense, because this is kind of starting to sound like, okay, yeah, you knew somebody was shooting over there. That needed to be your priority, going and addressing that. We'll see how he responded.
And he does. You can see by the shell casings, they'll line here, and you'll hear that shell casings, when a gun is fired, we go back, slightly back and to the right, slightly back to the right. And you can use the shell casings. There's never any over here, so he wasn't over here firing at Melody Flores. They're here, and they go right up the building here. So he gets in here. So what they're talking about is the gunman is moving up this school. And these distances, when you go and you see it in person, or you see it in some of these videos, you see the pictures, it doesn't do it justice. This and this, there's nobody that can see or understand here what's going on over here. There's not. She is telling him, but she's going to testify to you that when he got out, she told him he's in the building. And she was 100% wrong. He was standing right here, shooting here. And that's okay that she's wrong.
So again, I'm not sure this is really helping the defense. I don't expect you to be able to see through the building into this Looks like a narrow kind of passageway. I don't expect you to necessarily know exactly where the shooter is. But if you heard the shooter shooting into the building after you got out of your car and you didn't immediately respond to that, that kind of seems like an issue to me. Like, how is that not your top public safety priority in this particular situation? Okay, she tells you he's inside. He's not, but if you hear him shooting from a direction, don't you at least like go in that direction? I'm just really not sure this is super helpful for the defense.
We're not requiring her to be right. This is the most tragic day of Melody Flores' life. It's the most stressful thing that she's ever been through. But as the prosecutor says, Adrian says, well, but she's telling me that he's over there and that he's wearing black. And what did Bill say? He said, well, what did he do? He didn't do nothing but call the radio for other people to come. That's what police officers are supposed to do. Whenever you hear information, you have to call it out to everybody else for everybody else's safety.
Now, I definitely believe this. Your priority needs to be get the information out on the radio as soon as you have it. But that doesn't also preclude you from being able to do other things, either while you're talking on the radio or immediately after you communicate that information, then go.
So you'll hear that at that time now, 3 officers arrive right here. One of them has a rifle. They see him about to go in the building. One of them asks for permission to shoot. Permission, there's not even a chance for a response. Because by the time that they turn around, he's gotten inside.
Okay, so these officers arrived. They've got a rifle. They see him go in. They ask for permission to shoot. He's already inside, so they don't get the opportunity to do that. But if you're asking for permission to shoot, it sounds like you're pretty certain that that's your guy. So I'm going to want to know, number one, did they communicate this to everybody else? And 2, what did they do about it? They're the ones who saw it. You've already told me, Adrian Gonzales, he's nowhere near here where he'd be able to see that, but these other people saw it for themselves with their own eyes. So what did they do about it? How did they communicate that to Adrian Gonzales, and how did he become the person kind of with the responsibility to act on it? I mean, I buy that everybody kind of has a responsibility to act on it, but surely the people who saw it happening for themselves and were so certain about what they were seeing that they, were willing to shoot the guy. You're willing to shoot him from a distance. You should be willing to go up and, engage him and shoot him up close too. So what did these guys do? This is going to be, I think, an important part of the story for me.
Adrian doesn't know any of this. Didn't see any of this. They see it because they're on a direct line of sight to that door, to that west entrance. Adrian is dealing with a woman who is going to tell you and going to testify to you that she's telling Adrian that he's in the building. But it's clear that these gunshots, as he's moving up this building, it's clear that those gunshots are coming from outside. What Mr. Turner said was that he was supposed to make it to the corner of this building here. That's what.
Who's Mr. Turner? Who's Mr. Turner? I'm so lost with the people here. Who's Mr. Turner? Is that the prosecutor? I'm so lost.
He's talking about. Make it to the corner and distract the leg. The distance.
It's got to be the prosecutor. The prosecutor has been Bill so far. He's been Bill. And now out of nowhere, he's Mr. Turner. Guys, be consistent with your naming conventions for people. Don't switch between the name of the shooter, especially after you made a whole point about how you're not going to use the name because you don't want to encourage copycats and so forth. You don't want to, glamorize the shooter, then don't use his name. If you say you're not going to, then don't do it. If you start calling the prosecutor Bill, don't switch. It's so confusing.
From this point to this corner, there's nothing in between. And you'll hear that Adrian is doing as he's supposed to do. Once these gunshots happen, once he starts shooting into this side of the building, Adrian thinks they're taking fire. He does. He gets to the front of his car and he's trying to use the car as cover. There's a car. He has his car. This corner of the building is about 45 seconds away, walking from where his car is. Maybe 30, 32, 33, 34, 35, depending on how fast you walk.
That's why this is a really bad unit of measurement. Walking time. Walking time is not a great unit of measurement. It might matter, if we're talking about the time of response and so forth. But from my perspective, what's going to matter here is just physical distance, in part because I'm going to be assessing my risk from the shooter depending on my range. And depending on what the shooter has, do we know? We apparently know he has a rifle. So a rifle probably has a longer range than a handgun. If he's got a handgun and he's 200 yards away, probably not that concerned. I mean, it's not zero, but it's just, a lot less of a risk at that range than it is from, a high powered rifle and somebody who knows how to use it. But yeah, the distance, the physical distance seems to me to matter a lot more. Maybe you can use them both. The person would be able to walk there in this length of time. Maybe that matters. If the point is like it would be futile, okay, you should just tell me. He didn't go to the corner because it would have been futile. It takes 40 seconds to walk there. I would assume he wouldn't be walking. This is why the distance, This is why the distance. Is it 100 meters? I'm trying to think like a walking pace, 30 seconds. You can usually like run 200 less than a minute. So walk about 100. I don't know. Walking distance just doesn't seem particularly helpful here. He would be running to respond. If the issue is like he couldn't get there fast enough, what's the fastest he'd be able to get there would be the important measurement. But I don't know why we're talking about walking distance.
Or run. But you have to run through open. But his car is right there, so he doesn't do nothing. He gets behind his car to try to figure out where the gunfire is coming from. You're going to hear that these officers here, as the shooter is shooting into the building all the way up, these officers here, they think that the gunfire is coming at them. Because of the nature of gunfire, and we're going to talk about it. Once you have a rifle fire, it's going to bounce, and it bounces off of these structures, and it echoes, and it comes back to the people, and it causes confusion.
Okay, this makes a lot of sense. Definitely a lot of concrete in this area, a lot of, just acoustic kind of reactions to the situation. And everybody, you combine that with the stress of the situation, and everybody is going to think those bullets are coming at them. So that seems to me to be perfectly normal. And that's a very good reason why people would be confused, at least initially, about what's going on. Where is he? Identifying exactly where the target is going to be the initial challenge that they have to overcome. And it might not be as easy as we would like to think. I gotta assume there's body cam of all this, unless Uvalde's one of these jurisdictions that doesn't have body cam. Then I gotta assume there's body cam, and I do wonder what that's going to show.
So they think that the shots are coming at them. The shots aren't, but it's understandable they think so. He thinks they're coming at him. she's going to tell you that she's telling him that he's in the building when he knows that he's not in the building. But when he calls out that he's on the west side, you'll know when he understands and knows. When Adrian finally figures out where he is, their indictment says, knowing the general location of the shooter. He does call out on the radio the general location of the shooter. 1 second after the shooter's already entered the building. When Adrian is saying that he's by the cars in this lot, he's not there. He's inside. These guys saw him go in. These guys here saw what happened. Adrian is here and cannot see that.
So he learns he's in the west parking lot and he communicates that over the radio. And it turns out that at the time that he communicates that, he's not actually in the teacher's parking lot anymore. He's already gone inside the building, and the other police officers know that. Nevertheless, he now has a proximity for where the guy is. And so that does seem to kind of weigh on the side of you need to be making your way over into that area where you suspect him to be so that you can engage him and you can, impede, delay, distract, all of those things. The cover issue may play into that. I don't know. I really don't, but you can get back in your car. I don't know. I'm going to need to hear more about this particular part of the incident.
Now, other things to begin to happen. So at a certain time, and even you're going to hear these guys, they still don't know what his intent is. They think that they're setting up here. They're trying to figure out. They know he's wrecked and he shot at these people. They're assuming that he's trying to get away from them. Nobody still is assuming this is what ultimately happens is tragedy. Once something like this happens, right? This was the only and the first time ever that a school shooting starts with a wreck and a culvert.
We know that, but it doesn't matter. If somebody is shooting a gun in the parking lot and then goes in the school, you're worried about the safety of the school. It doesn't matter whether you had it sorted out in your mind about whether this fits in the sort of class of crimes that we characterize as school shootings or not. Somebody with a gun that they're firing it right there has gone into the school. That person is a threat, period. It doesn't matter. This is a terrible argument in my view. First time it ever started with a wreck and a culvert. Are these guys like sociologists, students of school shootings? They gone through the literature, have that in their minds when they're evaluating their response? Well, but likelihood of a school shooting, calculation going wild in the mind, given a sample of 250 school shootings to no, they probably don't know that at all. It's silly. This is such a silly argument. You knew that somebody was in the parking lot shooting a gun at people and that person went into school. Of course, that person is a threat. Of course, that person is a threat that you need to respond to. This is not good.
Now, part of the training. Don't get confused. Don't get confused by the fact that there may be other things going on. Just like if there's...
Don't get confused is now part of the training. That's very helpful. That's very helpful. The next time when there's a school shooting and the person, inadvertently chokes on their lollipop and spits it out on the pavement before going into the school, it's a good thing that they had this training so they don't get confused by that lollipop on the pavement and think, gosh, something else might be going on here. This is ridiculous. This is a dumb argument. If their training hadn't already accounted for somebody's in the parking lot shooting a gun and they've gone into the school and maybe you should consider that person to be a threat, then this training was pointless. This training was useless. Of course, the person is a threat. This is so stupid.
There's a robbery at this funeral home and somebody's running out of the funeral home. It's not the first assumption back then for a police officer to say, oh, he's robbing the funeral home, then he's going to run over here and he's going to go into the classrooms to shoot the children. It's not the first assumption. Now, of course, that doesn't excuse it. It's wrong. It contributes to the confusion. So as we get here, you'll see that, I think Bill said, his boss arrives.
Oh, he's Bill
what
again?
What happens is that some of the officers, as he's going in this way, some of the officers bring the car around to try to figure out, like, is he trying to get around here? You'll see that Coronado and you'll see that Chief Arredondo come this way and this way to where Adrian is. By the time that they talk to Adrian, you have Sergeant Page that pulled in and arrived. So what's happening is that Adrian's trying to call it out. He sees other people. He then hears and understands eventually when Sergeant Page gets there, as he's trying to brief him about what's happening, he hears that he's in the building. And Adrian is one of the first 3 people to go in. This is not a man that does nothing. This is not a man that is sitting and doing nothing. It's a man who is confused. It's a man who's talking, who has made assumptions that are understandable that turned out to be wrong.
Now, you've left out a big part of this story, if I'm to believe what the prosecuting attorney has told me the opening is going to show, which is 3.5 minutes with a lot of gunfire taking place. Because all this stuff that's just been described up to the point of them going in the building, there were things happening that all was happening before that. And so you can kind of potentially understand a little bit of initial confusion. I'm not real forgiving of the, there's a guy shooting a gun in the parking lot, but he crashed his car. So we don't know it's going to be a school. It doesn't matter. He's in the school. He's a threat. I'm not sympathetic to that. And definitely by the point he's still firing the gun in the school, now he's very much a threat. And I don't see how you're confused about that. So that's a big chunk of the story here that the defense has just written out. And that's not going to help them. I don't see how that's going to help him. If he's confused about 60 gunshots or however many it was, you're going to need to be able to explain that. You don't get to just put your head in the sand and pretend the bad facts don't exist. That's a fact. If that's going to come out in the evidence, that you're going to need to explain that, or we're going to have a big problem. And this doesn't bode well for having an explanation for that.
But he was trying. He was going towards that danger. And this is a man who, when it was time and they are standing here and it's time, because you'll hear that Coronado did say, like, he's in the building, we got to go. But Sergeant Page never said any of that. Sergeant Page said, we're standing there. We hear the gunshots from inside the building. We made the decision. Everybody's kind of making that decision at the same time. The first 3 people to go in, when Adrian goes in there, when he goes into the building, Sergeant Page is in front of him and he goes in behind him in the building. The gunman comes out of the classroom and takes shots at other officers coming in from the other side. Adrian Gonzales did not fail to act. The gunman turns that way instead of that way. He's right in the line of fire. And he was willing to be there in a hallway with a rifle with no real protection from a rifle. They had nothing that would protect them from a rifle.
Here and there and that way and the other way, this was terrible. This was terrible. I don't have any visual on what any of this means. I have no idea from this description if Adrian Gonzales is at risk or not. This was just inarticulate, not helpful. Did he shoot the guy?
That wasn't going to stop the rifle. If he turned around and shot him right in the chest, right past the Kevlar, that bullet kills him. And he did. He went in. He's one of the first in the building. But they get backed off because the shooter does not come out of the classroom. But you'll see him in the videos. Does not come out. But the gun comes out, shoots at other officers that are trying to come from the other way. They back off. You're also going to hear that Adrian has a radio. None of the officers' radios in Uvalde ISD, none of them, you'll hear what they say break. That just means none of them work. They cannot communicate inside the building.
Is that what it means? Why wouldn't they work inside the building? Why wouldn't their radios work inside the building? I don't think that's usually what break means, is it? Now, I could be totally having this wrong, but here's kind of my impression about situations like that, operations like that. I read about this recently, talking about like not undercover, but nighttime operations in Vietnam. Did a lot of high risk stuff at night. Sneak up real close. Got to be really super quiet. And so the way to communicate, with your lieutenant back at the post about what is happening with the field, is you simply hit the communication button and then let it go. Like, you can't talk into the radio because you can't make any noise. But just by hitting the line and letting it go, there's been communication. The fact of that line being open is like a communication. And so they were able to kind of develop codes where like 1 means yes, 2 means no, and they could communicate like that. That's what I understood a break was. I could be wrong, or this could be a different context. I don't know. But it does seem weird. The radios don't work inside the building. It makes sense if we're talking about not that they don't work, but just for tactical reasons, you don't talk on the radio because, now the shooter hears where you are. He can locate you. So you just communicate by opening and closing the line of communication instead of talking into the radio. I don't know. That all seems weird to me.
His chief tells him to go out of the building and call SWAT, Adrian does. You'll also hear that as people start arriving, right, because eventually there'll be 374 officers that arrive. They, in any of the indictment they read, they are not charging Adrian with the conduct of any officer in that hallway. Anybody that was standing there.
Wait, what? I mean, what? They're not charging him with the conduct of any officer who was standing. I don't even know. That's not English. I don't even know what that means. Those words put together like that. What does that even mean? Of course, they're not charging him with other people's conduct. Are you saying there were 374 officers there? Other people should have been charged? Is that? I don't know what this means. So he followed orders, told to get out and call SWAT, and he did. Can't really seem to blame him for that. To me, the issue seems to be boiling down to the initial reaction. When did you start to approach the threat? And if there were, you knew there were shots over in the parking lot, even if you thought they were in the building, and you didn't do anything to engage with him then, and maybe it's because you didn't have cover. I mean, I'll listen to the theory about the training and what you're supposed to do in that situation and so forth. But then shots start getting fired inside the school. And you still waited till your boss shows up. I might have a problem with that. Seems like that's kind of what we're zeroing in on as far as when there was something that maybe should have been done a little differently. Still don't have a real strong thought one way or the other. I don't feel like I've gotten enough from either side to really have a lean one way or the other on it. But I don't think anybody's going to say what he did in the hall was the problem. It doesn't sound like the issue. The problem is what happened with the shots in the parking lot and then later in the school before he went inside.
Anybody that was like getting hand sanitizer or anything that you might have seen, he is not being charged with any of that conduct. He is not being charged, in fact, with any other conduct of his. The only thing where they stop is they stop after the shooter enters 111 and 112 and shoots at or in the direction of the children. That's where it stops. So what the state tried to make you believe was this insane amount of time that he had to do all of these things from the time that he's here, from the time he first contacts Melody Flores to the time the shooter goes in the building on the side is about 1 minute. That's what we're talking about. It's about 1 minute. So he's trying to get this information, understand it, communicate it, figure it out, and it's about what, and also protect himself and the teacher. I mean, he's trying to make sure that both of them are not being shot at because they don't know. That's 1 minute of time. This isn't a man waiting around. This isn't a man failing to act.
Okay, but a minute can be quite a long time. A minute can be quite a long time if somebody's been shot and, carotid's been hit. A minute is quite a long time. This is that awful saying about how when seconds matter, the police are just minutes away. A minute is kind of a long time. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that this has helped them a lot.
They're not going to prove that. But what they are going to do, I'll tell you, they'll talk about it too. What they are going to do is they're going to show you the worst things that you've ever seen. You will not come out of this trial the same person in your heart. I'm not.
Oh, great.
They're not. They're not.
Emotionally blackmailing the jury. This is kind of a gamble that they're going to hold that against the prosecution. And I'm not sure they are. If they come out of this feeling like he should have done something in that minute or those 3.5 minutes or whatever it turns out being, they're going to blame him for the fact that we have a trial here and that they have to see all that stuff. They're going to blame you for that. I don't think they're going to blame the prosecution for having to show them the aftermath of what happened here. I don't like this approach at all. I don't think this is a smart move. Because now you have primed them to have their backs up and now to have resentment for whoever they identify as being at fault. And it's always a little easier to blame the defendant, isn't it? Give the prosecutor lots of benefit of the doubt. They're supposed to represent you, supposed to represent the community. Even if they're wrong, well, they had a good faith, just trying to get justice as best they can. People don't tend to hold that type of thing against the prosecutor, but they may very well hold it against you. I don't think this was smart.
They're not. It's traumatic. They're not. Nobody will ever be the same. And we're not comparing what we've seen, but you can't imagine the pain of what the prosecution wants you to do to see that. see those horrible things. You get so mad at Adrian that you convict him. So mad at Adrian that you say, convict him because
And it
of
might
this
work.
horrible thing that's happened. And I can't even describe it, what they're going to do. They're going to try to play on your emotions. They're going to try to do that. The monster who did this to these kids, the monster who hurt these children is dead. He is dead. He doesn't get this justice. Hopefully he's got it different. But he doesn't have this justice. There's not going to be this trial for him because he was shot and killed as he should have been by police officers on the scene. So now they're looking for somebody to put in that chair, to put you in these chairs. But showing you those pictures, like they're going to, I want you to be prepared for it. And I want you to know that it's going to hurt you. And I want to know you to know that it hurts us too. Thinking about anything these kids went through, it's terrible. I told y'all yesterday, I got a 4-1-year-old. It's the hardest thing to go through. But what the judge will tell you is that the law and the evidence are the only things that can guide you here. The only things you can use to come to your verdict. And I'd ask Mr. Cook to address you.
That was an awkward transition.
Refuse court, Judge. Counsel. I mean, Jason laid it out for you. I'm going to go over some specifics. We're gonna talk about those photos in a second, and I think Jason appropriately talked about them.
So I'm just going to pause to note that it was during this guy's opening statement the other day. That's the little brief period that I caught that I was like, ooh, this is compelling. This is getting my interest and this is getting my sympathy. So already right off the bat, I'm thinking this guy has got to dig himself way out of a hole. If he's going to if that impression is going to stick here, because we have a conflict between, the 3.5 minutes of hearing shots and everything the whole time the prosecutor told me about, and the completely not accounting for that at all in the defense argument that I've heard so far. So they told me it was supposed to be about what Adrian knew and when he knew it, but they left out a kind of important source of information, which is hearing with your own ears, apparently like 60 gunshots going off inside this building. And that's a pretty important piece of information and source of knowledge to act on. So, puts it in a little bit of a different frame for me. If I got that little bit out of context, is it still going to be powerful, or did I just need the whole rest of this to kind of be able to situate it? I don't know, but let's see.
And he's right. I mean, there's an animal involved in this situation, a monster, and he's no longer here. And that monster can't sit in that chair. And so what we have to do is we have to deal with what the government is doing and trying to have you focus on, because the monster's not here. And so the phrase that you're going to hear throughout this trial that law enforcement talk about a lot is called totality of the circumstances. And I'm going to ask you to keep that in your mind. We're going to ask you as we go over some of the specifics that Jason talked to you about, because this is dynamic. There wasn't a call initially for school shooting. You're going to hear something called a 1050. It's an accident. As Jason said, there was an accident. There was an accident and Adrian was doing his duty at the high school. You're going to learn the school, and you're going to hear about a lot of the school. And I'm not here to protect the school. I really don't care, because the school has a lot of blame. And you're going to hear other agencies gave the school a lot of blame. And one of the things that they should be blamed for is they didn't have a full-time officer. Adrian's full-time at the high school. Adrian said, well, there's an accident. I'm going to help. It's a small community. The agencies help each other, DPS, UVALDE PD, Independent School District. I mean, they all help each other, and they share radio transmission. And by the way, we're going to ask you to focus on the radio transmission. It's very important what was transmitted and what officers knew or didn't know during this very fluid and dynamic situation.
So again, telling me it's important and I need to focus on it, but not telling me why yet, or even like what specifically, just all of the radio transmission. I mean, I've already kind of figured out that what's going on over the radio is going to be very important to sorting out who knows what when. That seems like a pretty straightforward proposition. But, you know, I didn't like that when the first lawyer does it. I don't really like it when this lawyer does it either. Don't just tell me it's important. You know, I need to, if I'm going to internalize that, I need to understand why it's important. And so that story is much more important than just road mapping for me. This is an important thing. And this, I'm going to assume as a juror that anything I hear is potentially important. So it's just, it's not really adding anything.
So this is just we're gonna go over this briefly, okay? So this is what we're talking about. Not the skill, obviously. School. You're gonna hear about. Oh, am I doing it?
Yeah.
Give me 1 second, guys.
A little disoriented, but we're switching to a screen, I guess, with a chart,
Okay.
a drawing, a
You're gonna
rendering.
hear it at 11:28. At some point, we don't know for sure, but maybe around 11:20, this monster shoots his own grandma. And so this monster gets in a car and he thinks he's running away from a murder of his grandma. And so he's coming down, and you will hear that he tells people online, I'm gonna shoot up the school. There's times in there, and that's why we don't know exactly when he shoots his grandma, because he did that before and after, not to law enforcement, not to 911, to online people. But 11:28:23, he wrecks in that culvert. He doesn't manipulate the corner properly, and he crashes. You're going to hear Gilbert Limones, as Bill said, call 911. You're going to hear the 911 video from Gilbert, and it's going to be emotional because Gilbert's walking out there. You can hear it saying there's an accident. He's walking out there. Oh God, oh God. They're shooting. He's shooting at me. Because as they were going to the culvert to help, this monster is shooting up at them from the culvert.
Okay, so that means that the information about the shooting went to dispatch in the same call as the report about the accident. He's on the phone, and we're going to hear it, and we're going to hear him reacting. They're shooting, so dispatch's communication is going to be kind of important here. He said, we're going to hear about 10:50. I remember numbers apparently better than names. What does that say about me? We're going to hear about a 10:50. That's an accident. I guess that's how the call went out. This time frame seems kind of important. Did it go out as an accident? And before, you know, they had this information about the shooting, did they update the nature of the call? What's dispatch's role in all of this, in processing this information from the 911 call, now that we know the person who's called to report the accident is in the same call reporting being shot at?
He runs back. He lets the dispatch know he's walking to the school. He's walking to the school, and you will hear Gilbert, and I assume he's going to testify and say, in the name of Jesus, Lord, please protect those children.
Ooh.
Oh God, please protect those children. Please hurry. Yes, sir. We're on their way.
Ooh. He's walking to the school. Dispatch is now in the radar. Why didn't anybody know? Did dispatch fall down on the job here? If Gilbert knew and he's already worried about the safety of the children, yeah, because somebody that's shooting a gun going into a school is a risk, whether or not they're planning a school shooting per se.
But what I want you to focus on is, how was that dispatched? Incident involving a gun, not shooting at a school. Again, bailouts. Jason talked to you about what you're going to hear about bailouts and how many they have. This community deals with those type of bailouts. And so he deals with that. Between 11:30 roughly, 05, and 11:31:34, he's going to walk very deliberately, as Bill said, towards the school. At some point, he starts shooting at the school from the parking lot. you will also hear not just Gilbert, the funeral owner, say that she saw him hiding between cars. It's important. So at some point, Adrian realizes it, because it's very unclear on the dispatch, you'll hear him yourself, that there's a gun involved. Not towards children, there's just a gun involved, walking towards the school. So Adrian knows in his mind instantaneously that this is not just a crash, it's not a 1050, something with the school. And so he's driving, and at 11:31:41, here's Melody, and she's helped. To Bill's point, she's yelling at kids to stay in the building. Okay, so she's out here. You're gonna see Adrian drive all the way into the complex and drive back here. It's important. This is the east side of the building. This is going to be considered the west side, and you will see the south side, and this is the west side. Excuse me. He makes contact with Melody. Now, there's some other times that are important. This is at 11:31:55, roughly. Okay, times are going to matter on this because they're trying to hold Adrian accountable for what he did or didn't do and what he knew and didn't know, and that's important. So at 11:31:55, he's parked and he gets out of his vehicle and makes contact with Melody. Now, at 11:32:09, it's not on here, but 11:32:09, he dispatches and he says, shots fired, shots fired. So now he's taking cover. What's important though is here is that 11:32:23, Officer Mendoza shows up at the corner on the west side of the building.
Okay. Now, this is like roughly, I don't remember specifically what times they were going through when I was picking this up yesterday, but this is what I watched before, and this is what had caught me as like being, ooh, this is really detailed, really helpful, potentially very persuasive. And I guess maybe it's not having the same effect on me today. Because I'm seeing these times, right? But we already know. So he's walking towards the school. The shots have already been fired, and it sounds like there might be some issue with dispatch communicating that information, but I don't know because he didn't tell me specifically. I would have really liked to know what exactly did dispatch say. Because if they didn't say anything about the gun, even as the 911 caller is telling them, oh my God, he shot at us and he's going at the school, then the dispatch has got to bear a lot of the responsibility for what happened here because it didn't communicate the critical information out to the people in the field who are going to be responding to it. So I don't know. What I know, apparently shots are fired, and then this minute and a half, the guy is walking over towards the parking lot. And it's so like roughly 2 minutes after he shot over at the funeral home that Adrian Gonzales is pulling up and parking. So that was 2 minutes that the dispatch had roughly to be able to communicate. There's shooting happening here, and the guy is going towards the school. And then we had the 11:32:09 is when he called out on the radio, shots fired. So I'm assuming that's when the guy shoots into the side of the building because that's what he heard himself. So 11:32:09, shots fired. But didn't he already say he thought Melody was the shooter or had been shot at? Didn't we hear that from the first defense opening? He thought that they were grappling. He saw a dust cloud. He went towards that. That's why he went here. So he knew something about a gun. What did dispatch say? I feel like I'm getting such a disjointed version of the facts that I'm having to process it myself into something coherent and meaningful, which is exactly what the opening statement is supposed to do for me. I should be able to just sit back and kind of receive it. And I don't feel like I'm getting that. So 11:32:09, he calls in the shots fired. So let's say it's the first time he at least is confirmed. He knows for sure there are shots fired. It's 2 minutes after the guy starts walking over to the parking lot. And then we have another 14 seconds before this other guy shows up at the west side. 14 seconds. Are we going to do the thing where we count it off? Let's do it. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000, 6 1,000, 7 1,000, 8 1,000, 9 1,000, 10 1,000, 11 1,000, 12 1,000, 13 1,000, 14 1,000. You can cover some ground. You can cover some ground in 14 seconds. He knew shots were fired. We already know from the prosecutor, or at least can infer, he didn't go anywhere, do anything to respond to the shooter after knowing that shots had been fired in the vicinity of the school. I was willing to kind of give him some benefit of the doubt that, yeah, maybe something else is going on here. He's got a different role to play in this response. But I'm not hearing that from the defense at this point. I'm hearing times now that seemed like they told a good story yesterday, but now that I've got a little bit of the bigger picture, not sure that the times in a vacuum are really that helpful. 14 seconds, that can be a real long time. Running fast, you can cover a lot of ground in 14 seconds.
Pay attention to these times. He's already shooting. He's shooting at the side of the building. He shows up. He says shots fired. No one is going to testify that Adrian could see anything. And you'll see some pictures. Look, he's way over here in his car. You'll see the picture. And then the shooter, that monster, is walking up, taking shots. That he has no line of sight. Line of sight is important in this trial. 11:32:29, Officer Saucedo shows up on the west side of the building. Remember where Adrian's at? He's with Melody on the south side, but way where you can see the east side. 11:32, Sergeant Coronado shows up. Remember when Bill said his boss? His boss showed up a lot sooner than one running over here. There at this point, you will hear that Officer Mendoza believed he was under fire. Now, this is important because you're going to hear about echoes and vibrations and when people are shooting near buildings and how it sounds. Melody thinks she's being shot at. All I can tell you is, do we believe that she's being sincere? We do. I mean, she has no reason to lie about that. What you're going to find interesting, I think, we think it's interesting, but is that she comes in to talk to law enforcement 7 days later. They don't go to her. She's not interviewed the next day. 7 days after this incident, she comes in and says, I have something to say. She's listened to the media. She's watched all reports, and she comes in. And I'm going to say this respectfully because we're not going to try to beat her up. We're just going to talk to her. She's wrong about almost everything.
A lot of this isn't surprising. Yes, traumatic event. Not expected to have a particularly good memory of it. Totally expect memory to be distorted. There's this idea we have that eyewitnesses are like the best and the most credible, and the unfortunate reality is that the people that are in the stress of a situation like this are far more likely to be some of the most unreliable witnesses that you have. And I see what the defense is getting at here with the point of 7 days. She had 7 days to sit and ruminate about it and process it. And one of the things we know from memory is not like watching a movie over and over again in your head. Memory is a process of revision. Every time you visit it, every time you go back and recreate it in your head, you are potentially changing it. You're incorporating things that you know since then. You're incorporating feelings that you had about the incident, which, of course, in a very stressful incident, those are strong feelings. So I like in general what the defense is doing here, where they're making a point of saying, we're not trying to blame her. We're not trying to suggest she's doing anything wrong here, because you always have to account for that. I think to be effective in a situation like this, where you have an eyewitness who just isn't reliable, and it's not because they're not trying. It's not because, they're, like you said, being deliberately dishonest. That's just how memory works. he hasn't like quite given her that out, explicitly. And this might be the kind of case where, everything else being equal, you try to bring in a memory expert about something like that, so that you can emphasize this is completely not her fault. This is just how the brain works under stress. And it's completely predictable that she would have a lot of details wrong, and that she would fill in the gaps with things. And especially if she's reprocessing it, later on, and has listened to a lot of media and stuff like that over time. Doesn't sound like we're probably going to have any of that, because he would tell me, if there's going to be an expert that will testify to explain why somebody in this situation would, like, almost predictably, unfortunately, get a lot of these details wrong. But I think that in general, addressing that head on, telling us she's going to say a lot of stuff, and we're not going to be suggesting that she's malicious or anything like that, but we have to point out that it's not correct, is going to be important. So he says she's wrong about almost everything. Are you going to tell us about what she's wrong about? Some details would be good.
She describes Adrian as Officer Page. Completely describes him differently. She says that the shooter, that monster, didn't have a rifle. For sure he had a handgun. She thought that he shot at her, and all we can say, and the government will have to admit to this, but there's no evidence going to show that there is any, that you're going to hear something called defects. It's kind of damage from any type of gunfire. There's no evidence, objective evidence, that there was any shooting this way. No shells or rounds over here, no holes through the buildings. These are just metal buildings. So an AR-15 would have gone straight through that. No evidence of that. So she's wrong about a lot of things. And then she's also wrong and she tells the ranger of what door and how this animal got into the building. She's wrong about all that. Okay, and we think it's very sincere, by the way, but this is 7 days later. So these gentlemen are here. These officers are here, Mendoza, Saucedo, and Coronado, at these times. Now, these times are important. Okay, these times are very important. We talked about 3209, Adrian radio, shots fired. So Ramos is walking up this side of the building, and he gets into the school. And that's important, because we're going to talk about it, and you're going to hear about agencies evaluating, different agencies, and I'll tell you about who they are in a second, evaluating this incident. And every one of them wonders why this school door is unlocked. This school door is unlocked. This school door is supposed to be locked.
Okay. Do the police know that the school door is supposed to be locked? Because that could affect a lot how and why they responded the way they did. If they know the door is supposed to be locked and they expect it to be locked and they don't think it's going to be unlocked, then they don't expect the shooter is going to be getting in that way. And so they would be, anticipating him being in a different location. Problem is, we already heard, right? These other officers over here, Mendoza, Saucedo, and somebody else, saw him walk in the door. They saw him walk in. So even if they knew it was supposed to be locked, when they saw him walked in, they know that it wasn't. I appreciate how the defense is trying to point out, look, there's a lot of blame to be had here if you got to go down that road. And it's one of the things I always hate about incidents like this, is the need to play the blame game. And I wish there was a way to kind of be able to evaluate it, learn from it. You definitely need to identify mistakes so that you can correct them and do better the next time. But it seems to be so difficult to do that without pointing the fingers and without kind of drawing that ultimate implication that, but for your mistake, this wouldn't have happened. Therefore, you're to blame. Like, there's just so much guilt and condemnation and anger and all of those very bad things caught up in that. And sometimes I guess, you need that, and that's appropriate, and that's how you have to respond. But it seems like this is a situation where, yes, the shooter is ultimately to blame, and we're kind of litigating the secondary blame because the state's chosen to point the finger at Adrian Gonzales as being kind of the secondary one to blame. And so the defense strategy here is, clearly, at least in part, point out the other people that are to blame. Try to, I guess, dilute the effect of that. That look, if there was something he could have done differently, there was also stuff that dispatch could have done differently. There was stuff the school could have done differently. I hate that. It's such a race to the bottom type of way of processing an incident like this. I know I haven't had to go through it personally. I don't have any intention of judging how people who are grieving, who suffered from something like this are processing it. But as a human, I have to look at the situation and think that the less anger and resentment and all of that condemnation that you generate or hang on to out of an incident like this, the more likely you'll be to heal. I really feel like the anger and the condemnation is like the antithesis of healing. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I understand the defense kind of has to do that, because if we can get mad at other people, then maybe we won't be so mad at Adrian Gonzales, and we won't judge his actions so harshly. But I don't necessarily like it.
I get passionate because that school door should have been locked. And you're going to hear evidence that if there's anything that could have changed this incident, if that school door was locked, and it should have been. So he gets into the school at some point. This monster enters the school at 11:32:58.
11:32:09 we have when he called, when our defendant, Mr. Gonzales, Adrian Gonzales, called in over the radio, shots fired. Almost a minute later that he goes into the building. That seems like a long time. You can cover quite a bit of ground if you're running in a minute. He said lines of sight are important, and I agree, lines of sight are important. And I think one of the things that matters is that if the shooter isn't in your line of sight, then you're not in his. And so that's kind of consistent with the whole conceal and cover thing. If you can stay out of his line of sight, you can continue to approach. And I think that's what the state is getting at with the corner of the building over here that's marked AC, is he could have gone to the corner of the building without ever being in the shooter's line of sight. He can stick his head around the corner. He had almost a minute to do that, to cover that ground and to check it out. And if he had done that, he might have been able to get the shooter in his line of sight, intercept him before he went into the school. Now, the prosecutor didn't really make that case to me because he didn't spell out to me what exactly should Adrian Gonzales have done, and is that feasible? Does that fit given the distances that we're working with here? Could he have done that? I don't know. But that seems to be their argument, and seems plausible, at least to me. But you're going to have to get a lot more than plausible to get to a conviction, unless the jury, is just so mad and frustrated at everybody about what happened to these kids that they'll go ahead and throw the book at him anyway.
These gentlemen have been at this scene, these officers, long before that, on the west side, not the south side.
Long before that, he's like, yesterday this seemed so impressive, and now today it's like, he's got this very detailed information on the map, and when he's giving his argument now, he's reverting to this general descriptions. Been on there a long time before that. Well, 11:32:23, isn't that what that timestamp is for? So for a long time before that, what you mean is a little bit over 30 seconds, 40 seconds, right? 45 seconds approximately, they had already been there. The precision would be more helpful because, again, the characterization, I should be able to reach that myself. If you're having to tell me, I may or may not buy it. I may or may not agree with it. So you have this good information to work with, but he's like reverting now to this sort of summarizing instead of the working with the specifics that he's already got.
With a long rifle, not a handgun. With cover, because their car's there in a formation. So you're going to hear Saucedo shows up at the time he does, literally seconds after Mendoza. Mendoza thinks he's taking fire, but there's no evidence that Ramos shot that way. Zero evidence. They're not even going to try to assess that. Claim that. But still, Mendoza thinks, and he talks about, he describes it. He's getting behind the car. He's trying to get behind the engine block. Saucedo drives up and blocks him so he can cover his cover officer, which I understand that if it was really happening. Saucedo gets out with a rifle. Coronado shows up. Sarge, can I shoot? No response, turns back, and they acknowledge he went into the building. There's an acknowledgement from these officers that he went into the building, but they didn't go to the building. And we're not trying to say.
There's an acknowledgement from the officers that he went into the building. I'd like to know what that means. Does that mean that they said in their reports or in their interviews or something like that? Or does it mean that they communicated that like over the radio or something? Because that matters. That distinction matters. Did they know and communicate, or did they know and not communicate? What does this acknowledgement mean?
Say blame them also. I'm just saying this is fluid. They think because of all these bailouts. Can I just tell you, we think the evidence is going to show. We know it's going to show because the officers were thinking this. This is not Adrian. This is them right now. Mendoza, Saucedo, and Coronado. They couldn't even wrap their head around the fact that this potential could be a school shooting. They thought that this person with a gun was trying to get away from officers and was going to cross through the school to go out the east side of the building.
It doesn't matter. That's fine. You thought that that's what he was going to do, but he had a gun in the school parking lot, was firing shots at people, and he's inside the school. He's a danger. It doesn't matter if you thought maybe he's just going to go through or whatever. Because what if he doesn't? What if he decides he's going to go in and he's going to barricade himself in there? What if there's a kid that has a bathroom pass that's coming down the hall right as he's going through the school? He's a threat. He's a danger. Even if you didn't think in your minds, oh, this is turning into a stereotypical school shooting. I hate this argument. I really do. You're not confused about the danger. The fact that you don't know specifically what's going to unfold, that's reality. Yeah, nobody can see the future. But you know he's a danger. And you know he's right there in proximity to these kids.
That's what they thought. That's what you're going to hear them say. Let me tell you what's super important, because Bill told you, the government told you,
now,
that Adrian is assessing the situation. You're going to hear about that. You're going to hear about observing, orienting yourself to the situation, deciding, then acting. It's called OODA loop, okay? You're going to hear about evidence like that.
OODA, the OODA loop.
This is objective evidence, not anybody's opinion, because you're going to hear it yourself. At 11:32:59, 1 second after this monster got into the building, Adrian calls out, he should be on the west side, supposed to be wearing black. Why? Because Melody's with him, telling him information, and he's collecting data. He's heard shots. He doesn't know where that's coming from. Everybody thinks they're being shot at, including Melody, including these officers. And he does what his training tells him to do, relay information. He's relaying information. He's not seeing anything. Nothing's been done in his presence. When they read out the indictment, nothing was done in his presence. In his presence.
Okay. He calls out that he's on the west side of the building. This is 50 seconds now after the shots fired. This is almost a minute after he knew somebody with a gun was firing it in the vicinity of the school. And he hasn't approached it yet. I'm gonna need a reason why. I'm gonna need a reason why. There may be a reason why, but that is just a long time to be letting somebody with a gun wander around. Unapproached. Posing a risk to anybody and everybody that could be in that area. I'm gonna need a reason why in that 50 seconds doesn't seem like he did anything.
Relays it. These times are critical, and we're going to humbly ask you to stay focused on these times. He's reporting as he's receiving information. Note what's going on where he believes he should be, near the teacher parking lot. He's already in the building. And then 22 seconds later, he is shooting into those classrooms. And then seconds later, he's in the classroom. Opportunity and ability. This is what it's going to play out to. I know when you speak in generalities, it's
so then he's in the building, and then we got more time, more 22 seconds, and still nobody's done anything. And then a lot of kids getting shot, and still, apparently, we have the same problem we had with the first defense closing, where that whole time period of the shooting inside of the school isn't being accounted for. And the reaction to the firsthand knowledge that you have that something is going on now inside of the school, they don't seem to be reacting to it. And that's going to be a big problem.
It's easy to make an accusation until you have to peel the onion back, until you have to come into specifics. And we've asked you guys, we asked you for your permission in jury selection if we could ask tough questions. And it's always tough to ask tough questions about a tough case and sensitive situations. That's why we ask you those specific questions. But we're going to do it because we have to. But this is what the evidence is going to show. And the government's going to have to stand up when this is all over and after you've heard all the evidence. And they're going to have to say, we want you to hold the man responsible that as he walks into this fluid situation, drives into this fluid, goes to the danger, drives into the storm because he thinks that he's going to this person, this suspect, with a gun. He doesn't stick back and create a perimeter, with all respect to these officers. He goes in. He thinks and then he realizes it's the coach. At the time, he didn't know that. And you'll see the funeral video, like Jason said. And they're going to have to say that when he radios, because that's when he knows, Melody's with him. She's not going to know what times. A second after, he's already in the building. How can he delay, distract, or deter someone when he doesn't see him? He's completely on the opposite side of a building. And by the time he finds out the situation, observes and orients, and then communicates, he's already in the building. And then seconds later, this animal is stealing children from UVALDE community. So what the government will say and do is they'll want you to focus on Coronado's video. Remember Coronado, the one that was here initially and was asked to shoot, and then and he'll talk to you about it, and then goes to this side, and you'll see him running up from the other side. You'll see his body cam video running up this way. One thing that we want you to focus on, though, is his body cam video and Mendoza's body cam video. They have body cam videos. They both, interestingly, start at 11:35:10. Write it down. 11:35:10. At the same time, because someone from the government's investigation synced all these videos together. And I shouldn't say all of these, there's not that many, but synced all these videos together. And they both start at 11:35:10. You saw.
Wait a sec. I'm confused now. They have multiple body cam videos, but they don't start until after these, what seem like the critical events have already taken place, and it has something to do with how the prosecutor handled the body cams. Am I getting that right? Is this implying also that Adrian Gonzales does not have a body cam, that just Mendoza and Coronado have body cams? I don't know. This is kind of weird. It was certainly a question I had. Do they have body cam? Okay, they have some, but it's got this weird. Is it a glitch with it? I don't know. I don't know what I'm to make of this.
What time they showed up? There's got to be body cam from when they were here talking, perceiving things. They both, and that's what you're going to see. And so as Coronado is running at 11:35:10, he's already come all the way around, and he meets Chief Arredondo, and then they start running up. And then they finally run into Mel, because she leaves Adrian's point and goes to the school. She leaves, and Adrian stays there in cover, and he had communicated information. And you're going to hear that a Lieutenant Vargas shows up, and then eventually a Sergeant Page shows up, who Melody describes as Adrian, and she was mistaken about that. And then as Coronado and Arredondo are walking up and running up, there's shots fired. Now you will see, and we anticipate that the government will focus on this. On Coronado's body cam, it's moving, that you see Adrian and Page standing there. Now they're not standing there eating something, or they're standing there talking. Adrian had head cover. Page drives up. There's a realization that he didn't take any fire. So they get out. Sergeant Page gets out, and it's really a moment. You're walking. They're like this. You're going to see them walking towards the school. Then they hear shots fired. We can hear Sergeant Coronado say, "Get in the school." And he said, "Oh shit, get in the school." And he's yelling and he's out of breath. But there's no evidence that neither one of them heard him. They were so far from him. God bless you. They didn't hear him. And they immediately run into school. They're one of the first ones, if not the first ones, Page and Adrian in the school. And then there's some officers on the other side. And as he said, they take fire. That's what this is going to boil down to. But we anticipate they're going to want you to focus on that literally that moment, that second that you see Adrian and Sergeant Page standing there and then walking towards the school, and then they sprint into the school, and you see Adrian's gun drawn, and he's in the hallway. It goes in again. We also think they're going to focus on time to enter, because Bill talked about that in opening.
Yeah.
This 3 minutes and whatever seconds. There's a lot going on in these 3 minutes. We're going to focus and break it down. It's not about just saying there's 3 minutes, because their indictment doesn't cover all 3 minutes. Their indictment covers what they decided to prosecute on is when he made it all the way, that animal made it into the building and then started shooting into the school. Remember, at 11:33:22. That's what it specifically covers, because that's when the assaults begin.
And that seems to me to make sense, right? When he says that's what it covers, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but yes, the 3 minutes seems to me to be the big problem. Between the time that he got there, he knew that there were shots fired when he first gets there. There's additional shots fired into the side of the school that he calls out. The guy goes into the school and into the classrooms and fires shots in the classrooms. This time frame, I'm gonna need some help with, because according to the prosecuting attorney, 60 some shots or whatever it was, and he still hasn't gone in to approach that. Like, at a certain point, that's the only information that you need, is that this extremely dangerous imminent threat is present right under your nose, and you need to deal with it. I'm not real clear about what he's saying about the indictment. If he's saying that other later parts or something don't matter, and that's fine. That doesn't seem to really be the issue. The issue does seem to be that 3 minutes that it took after he already knows there's a shooter on the school grounds to start doing something to engage the shooter.
Not the 3 minutes and whatever seconds after, as many officers are on the scene at that time and surrounding the school.
Oh, I see what he's saying. He's saying that the indictment is just limited to the first like minute and a half or whatever it was of that time frame, not after he got into the school and then all the shots are fired. And according to the prosecutor, he still doesn't do anything. That would seem to be some pretty bad indictment drafting to me, if that's the case. Because if all we're focused on in the indictment is the minute and a half between when he's arriving and when the guy goes in the school, I mean, yeah, we could maybe question if there is more that he should have done, given that there were two separate incidents of shots fired before that happened. But it does seem to be excluding a fairly significant part of the whole incident, which is the gap in time between him going into the building and the police going into the building. Might have been helpful to kind of spell that out and clarify that right up front. You know, just draw our attention right to that. Here is the time period that the indictment is concerned with. So whatever the prosecutor has told you outside of this time frame is not going to be evidence that can be considered to find him guilty or not guilty. The only time frame that you can consider as pertinent to guilt is what he did during this specific time frame. So now let's get into the details about what was happening during that time frame. And yeah, there's still some gaps in there I think you might need to explain, but it's just a lot less of a task than having to explain. If he's sitting there while shots are going on inside the school and not doing anything, that's bad. And that could be on the prosecutor for not having that time period included in the indictment, because that seems evident. Once there's shots inside the school, you better be doing something. And if you didn't, I think anybody is going to have a pretty big problem with that.
Well, we'll talk about that. We'll cross-examine on that, and you'll hear evidence about that. And then they're going to focus on Melody Flores. And I kind of gave you a heads up about Melody Flores. She's just wrong about a lot of things. And it's traumatic. It's stressful. As Jason said, and I'm not saying this to scare you but we talked about this in jury selection. None of us, you will not leave this trial the same. You just won't. And thank you for taking on this role, but it's just, we're going to talk about the photos in a second. But Melody's wrong about a lot of things. Her times, she's with Adrian, not sure how long. So Adrian's dealing with her at the time, and she's with him. There's shots being fired. She sees bullets or glass breaking. Officers are coming, they're around. You're going to hear radio dispatch. Again, that's going to be really important about what's being communicated to the officers by the dispatcher and then by other officers. This is not in the comfort of a courtroom as one of the Rangers during their investigation would hear say with 20/20 hindsight and playing Monday morning quarterback. That's from a Texas Ranger, not from us. Okay, and because you're going to hear about interviews, and so they're going to really want you to focus on these photos. And I wish they wouldn't, not because it hurts us, because that's what they want those photos to do. It's because it hurts those precious people over there. That's why. I shared with you in board what my family's been through, and so I get it. And so we're going to ask you to really, well, if you have to get emotional, you get emotional. You may. I anticipate you will, depending on what you see. This is emotional. This is an emotional trial. People are going to get emotional. Bill's a good man. He got emotional. But we're going to ask you not to make a decision off emotion, because that doesn't bring justice to anybody. But I do want you to focus on this. There were multiple agency investigations. Multiple. The DOJ did an investigation. Looked at all the evidence that the government's going to show you. There's not some secret evidence, with all due respect to them, that they're going to show you that the DOJ didn't see. Texas House of Representatives did an investigation. They had a committee. They didn't. There's not new evidence going to be presented to you that they didn't see. This report has a lot of criticism to go around to the school. It really has to do with that door and other things, by the way. Radios that can't work inside, officer not assigned to the school, lockdown procedures that weren't followed, a lot of things, way to communicate, individual locks. The actual classroom, 111, wasn't locked. 111 wasn't locked. You'll hear some evidence of could it even be locked? And did they know about it? And what should have happened? You're also going to hear evidence of the Uvalde police policy from 2015, whether it's ever been replaced about how officers are supposed to respond. Should they wait for backup cover? Should they communicate? Should they observe? And training is going to matter in this case. And so we're going to ask you to stay focused. You're going to hear a lot of training.
Yeah, this is important to me. This is really important to me because I do need to know what he's been told to do. If he's been told, hey, you're the first one on the scene, you can't engage the shooter, that is going to affect, did he act reasonably or not? Did he act recklessly or not? Did he disregard the standard here is it can be as much as criminal negligence. Did he with criminal negligence fail to act, and so by failing to act create a risk of harm basically to these 12 children? 29 children. And so gross negligence is not, I mean, it's not a super high standard to meet, but one of the really easy ways that you meet that is by showing he didn't act in accordance with the policy, with the training, with a standard that's been set that he is expected to know about. And so if his training told him that this is what he's supposed to do, you're the first one on the scene, you're not supposed to solo engage with a shooter, you need to wait for backup, then it's going to be hard to find him negligent. Might have reason to take fault with the standard, and should that be the case, but I don't know that you can hold this guy accountable if that's what the standard is and he followed it. So I agree it's going to be really important, and I was kind of hoping to hear more about that in opening, because frankly, this opening, having this all in context now, this was super repetitive of the first. Why did we have two defense lawyers tell us the same thing in two different ways? They really did. They both just told us the same thing in two different ways. Like I thought that one would tell us one thing and the other would like fill in the gaps or tell us about something else. I mean, that's kind of what normally makes sense if you're going to split an opening statement. But they really just told us the same thing two different ways. And I was waiting for policy in the first one. I didn't get it. Now I just have a kind of reference that policy is going to come up. But instead of telling me to stay focused, why don't you just tell me right now, what's that policy say? That would be really helpful. If the policy says he's supposed to wait for cover, and that's how he was trained, that really matters. Don't expect me to just kind of bookmark that in my brain and come back to it when you get to trial. This is your opening statement. It's your chance to tell me now what the evidence is going to show that policy says.
Again, totality of the circumstances of what Adrian
Your Honor,
was
I'm going to
experiencing.
object to him talking about evidence. I mean, he's supposed to be doing an opening statement, outlining the evidence that are going to present. Right now, he's talking about third-party investigations. Those agencies did not have the full investigation of the Uvalde grand jury, and I think that unless he says that the evidence will show you that they're going to present about these third-party investigations, I think this isn't doing nothing but misleading the jury as to the evidence that they're going to hear in this case.
I think that's right for cross.
Oh my, what was that? What was that? The speaking objection now. I'm done with this prosecutor already. What the hell is that? Object, he's talking about the evidence? Yeah, it's a freaking opening statement. That's what opening statement is for. What is the matter with you? What a pointless objection. All this is like such bullshit. This was just getting up to make a little speech in front of the jury. This is why speaking objections are not allowed, because they invite obnoxious little prosecutors like this to get up and proselytize. They don't like where he's going. They think maybe he's making a point, so they're going to try to break it up and plant this seed. Oh, he's lying, or he's being misleading, or whatever. You get closing to point that out. You have a whole closing argument to go to the jury and say, remember what he said in opening? The evidence was going to be, and then in fact it was this. Yeah, it was pretty misleading what he said in opening. That's what your frickin' closing is for. This is not your opportunity to grandstand. The speaking objection has done more to turn me against the state than just about anything I've heard so far. How obnoxious. What a stupid objection. There's no way this gets sustained.
Cross-examination, Judge.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, what the lawyers say in opening statement is not to be construed as evidence. They're summarizing what they believe the evidence will show. If the evidence doesn't show that, you can recall that.
Thank you, Judge.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Department of Homeland Security reviewed evidence. City of Uvalde hired Mr. Prado, reviewed evidence. And what you'll see, Adrian fully cooperated every time. He wasn't in a corner hiding. He didn't hold information. He cooperated. He talked. He talked to investigators. He talked to the Rangers. He talked to whoever wanted to talk to him because he wanted to help. We're going to ask you to focus on what the evidence will show Adrian did. He took the call. He took the call to go to a school that he wasn't assigned to. He drove to the suspect into the storm, thinking that it was the person that had this gun walking towards the school. He gathered information the way his training told him to do. That's what you're going to see. You're supposed to gather information so you can let other officers know what's going on. He went into a building. After relaying that information, one of the first to go in, as we talked about. He called SWAT because he was asked to call SWAT because those radios couldn't work in the building. Like Jason said, break. I can't break, meaning I can't dispatch, I can't communicate. So he goes outside to do that. Many officers are on the scene at that time. He stood perimeter because he didn't know if he was watching the east side. He's on the south side. There's a west side. Other officers are inside by this time. And so he stood perimeter at the school. He tried to find out if class was even in session. He didn't even know if class was in session. They needed to find out. You're going to hear that the officers are there kids in the school? They didn't even know. There wasn't certainty that even kids were in the school. Remember, he's coming from a high school. They call it Mexican Park, right? That's the way they call it in Uvalde. And many of the high schoolers were there. So are these kids even in the school? It's not his school. This is not where he patrols on a regular basis.
I'm pretty confident that the official name of the park is not Mexican Park. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. That's just what they call it. Oh, Texas. What a place.
And you're going to hear evidence he evacuated children. You're going to see it on Coronado's. They're breaking windows and they're getting kids out as now they're waiting for, you're going to hear Vortec. These are people that have rated shields. They can take a high-powered rifle because they were under-resourced. That community was under-resourced. They didn't have a shield, a rated shield for a high-powered. You're going to hear that there's shields for handguns and then there's shields for high-powered rifles. And they were waiting for that. So he's evacuating children from other classrooms on the other side. And he's checking on Ruiz. You're going to hear about an officer, Ruben Ruiz, who he communicated with. Was tragic part of this. He's talking to his wife, and she's been injured. She passed. And Ruiz wanted to go inside, and so, I love my wife. Who wouldn't want to just go in there, you know? And they took his gun away from Officer Ruiz. And Adrian kept going back and checking on him twice. He's doing all these things at the same time. Got the building plans because they were asking for it, because people didn't understand the layout of this building. He got that for them. And he ultimately secured the master key because they needed the master key. And then you're going to hear some tactics about how you breach an outward swinging door versus an inward swinging door and what is needed and whether they had the equipment to do that. But the evidence will show they didn't. This is what Adrian did. I mean, the government wants to make it seem like he just sat there, you know. He didn't just sit there. He did what he could with what he knew at the time, and this was fluid and it was a dynamic situation.
I understand broadening the scope beyond the time frame that the prosecutor wants to focus on, and potentially beyond the time frame that's laid out in the indictment, to the extent those things are different. But pointing out all the things he did after the fact, I don't think is really curing the problem of that initial response and whether there was something else he was supposed to do different. I don't feel like I'm any closer. I assume we're getting close to the end of his argument, but we'll see. I don't feel like I'm any closer after hearing either from the state or the defense. You know, kind of leaning one way or the other. And you really should, after an opening, I think, you should have you should have an interpretation of the evidence that comports more with one side or the other. If you don't have that, then I feel like neither side has really done their job. The prosecutor hasn't done their job here of showing how the story leads to, beyond a reasonable doubt, Adrian Gonzales should have done something else and he didn't. He had an obligation to do something else and he didn't. That's what they have to prove. I'm not getting that. I have a feeling that maybe that's the case, but there's so much missing. I'm not there. The defense had an opportunity here to poke those holes wider and show me, hey, if he was supposed to do something else, here's what his training said he was supposed to do. Why didn't he do something else? Because he was trained to do what he did. And that would have made it a lot easier to kind of fall one way or the other. But they didn't do that. And so it leaves me questioning, well, if the policy says that, why wouldn't you tell me? Is it possible that you didn't tell me that because the policy doesn't say that? I mean, it's great that he did this other stuff. And the problem, I think, so often in criminal trials is that we expect it to be a white hat, black hat type of situation. I don't like judging people. It doesn't come naturally to me. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy condemning people. I understand people are different and a lot of people love to point fingers. But that's really not me. And so, you know, to kind of be able to overcome that, I think for a lot of people, you have to sort of universalize somebody. You have to paint them as all good or all bad. And most crime is not like that. Really egregious, you know, homicides and things like that, much easier to do that. But most crimes are people who are not monsters. They aren't monsters. They don't do bad things all the time. They aren't completely, you know, terrible and unredeemable. Most crimes aren't like that at all. They're about these limited types of incidents where somebody made the wrong choice for one reason or another. And so this defense, you know, I understand we want to make it clear he's not completely a bad guy. But he doesn't have to be a completely bad guy to be guilty of what the prosecution is charging him with. And all of these facts don't really get at the core issue that I'm walking away from this opening with, which is that what matters the most here, a couple things. The 1.5-minute time frame between when he gets to the school and when the shooter goes in the building. What was going on over the radio in terms of information sharing, and what was he trained to do under these circumstances compared to what did he do? We already know kind of what he did was he hung out with Melody. He didn't approach or otherwise try to apprehend the shooter. So was he trained to do that or not? These are the most important things to me, and I didn't get that from either side. So, not like real thrilled with these openings at as we get close to the conclusion.
And we're going to ask you, and I don't know how you do it, and we all have to do it a different way, is to stay focused on this because this is going to be emotional. And because we want justice, right? We talked about that. We talked about that our system works off of you and Lady Justice with a blindfold, and that's what we're going to ask you to do. Because evil is not rectified with injustice. Pure evil visited that precious community. It did. But it's not rectified with injustice. And so at the end of this trial, we're going to come back to you and humbly ask you to consider the law and the facts and properly apply them. And we're going to be requesting and asking for a verdict of not guilty. Thank you for your attention.
Is anybody booking the rules?
Yes, sir.
So that is the conclusion. I have to say, I think that's a very powerful conclusion. This lawyer, to me, is by far the most charismatic of the group that we saw. The lady prosecutor, she can trip on the stairs on the way to court tomorrow, and it might be the best outcome for the state, in my opinion. Yikes! Oh, what a nightmare. But that conclusion, he does have a charisma to him. He's got that felicity with being able to remind them about the conversations that they already had during voir dire, and that does tend to personalize the relationship a little bit. It reminds them of, we talked and we formed a connection in some way over the course of having those conversations. So I think that can be a very powerful thing to draw on. But that conclusion, evil is not rectified with injustice. I mean, it's a very powerful message, and it's very true, and it cuts right through the emotional clutter of a case like this, that just because you're outraged and horrified and you want to point the finger, you're not making anything better if you point it in the wrong direction. You have to be very careful about what is justified in a situation like that, because if this guy's not a monster, and it doesn't seem like anybody's saying Adrian Gonzales is a complete monster in every way, he's not. He did do good things. He may or may not have had a bad lapse of judgment when it came to those first critical minutes when he arrived on the scene. An event like this affects everybody involved. Now, this isn't going to be like, this is not this is not in the ballpark of re-traumatization, the way that let's charge a grieving parent with murdering their child on a shaken baby syndrome theory, pseudoscientific bullshit. Parents literally lost their child, and now they're going to be, dragged through the ringer of the criminal justice system, unjustly accused of something horrible. That's awful. This is not on that level, but it is a similar kind of phenomenon. Accusations that are reckless and unfounded can cause a massive amount of damage in a situation like this. So it's wonderful. Great point from the defense to hammer that home for the jury and kind of trigger their empathy a little bit. You know, he also went through something here, and that doesn't necessarily excuse him if he did something wrong. But you might want to be careful about casting the judgment. So thought that was good. Think it would have been better if they'd given me a little bit more to work with in terms of why should I think one way or the other that he did what he was supposed to do or not. But by and large, yeah, I can't say I come out of these openings with a real strong lean one way or the other at this point. And that's not really a great sign for the openings. I feel like there's still too much I don't know to be able to make that kind of judgment. So I don't know if I'm going to have to watch this whole trial. And frankly, at this point, it seems like it's not clear if there's even going to be a whole trial because there's been some issues with non-disclosure of evidence, and there was a whole hearing about jury took the day off, a whole hearing about how they're going to deal with that, and I haven't seen how all that is played out yet, but could really see this one going anyway, coming out of the openings at this point. Not a real slam dunk for either side. So, well, maybe I'll have to keep an eye on it. I don't know. We'll see. It's been an awful lot of news going on in the recent days. We had a Nick Reiner hearing. We had President Maduro. President. In name only, perhaps not even legitimately in name only. Whatever. He's been in court. Interesting stuff going on with that. It's been kind of a busy news week, so I have to see how things unfold. But might be worth keeping an eye on this one just to see if I can get some of those questions answered. So, hey guys, either way, it's always fun to look at opening statements and kind of just from a technique standpoint and the storytelling element, be able to kind of evaluate how this is going, how this has set the stage. And so far, it looks to me like it's a pretty even match based on those openings. So maybe that interests you in the case. Maybe it makes you less interested in the case. I don't know. I guess for me, it does tend to make me more interested because now I want to know enough to have an opinion, So with that, guys, maybe I'll watch it. Maybe I won't. I don't know. I guess if I do, I'll make something and we'll watch it. Otherwise, I did see that Ian Runkle, good old Runkle of the Bailey, is following this case. So you can definitely expect fantastic input from him, particularly with the tactics and the firearms and things like that are going to be important in the case. So will be an excellent source that I may end up following myself. So thank you guys for joining me. Hope this has been, if not super educational, at least somewhat entertaining to be able to walk through the openings. So with that, guys, appreciate you all, and I'll see you next time.